In the Metro Council work session, if we could all settle down. We could all settle down, that'd be great.
You gotta put some mama.
I thought I did. I don't really have a mama voice.
You gotta put that mama voice on.
All right, we are beginning the Metro Council work session of June 24th, 2025. Georgia, will you do the roll call?
Councillor Simpson,
Present, good morning.
Councillor Gonzalez,
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal,
Present.
Councillor Lewis,
Present.
Councillor Wong,
Present.
Councillor Nolan,
Present.
Council President Peterson.
Here, thank you. Before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
I'm Laura Lepley, a Metro Park Ranger. Here at Oxbow Park, safety is our #1 priority, not only for our guests, but for our staff members. I'm at the Welcome Center and you're at the Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairway to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the reception desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at Oxbow Park.
Great, thank you. We will move on to our first agenda item, which is the Montgomery Park Streetcar Extension Locally Preferred Alternative. Councilors, as you may recall, the proposed Montgomery Park Streetcar Extension in Northwest Portland is identified in several regional plans as a top priority for transit investment. In addition to expanding the existing streetcar network, the project seeks to support new safety and accessibility improvements and even support the development of new. Here today to present the project's locally preferred alternative and prepare us for JPAC and council consideration next month. We have with us Alex Orshak, Metro Senior Transportation Planner, Sean Canny, City Transportation Planner at PBOT, and Mauricio Leclerc, Area Planning and Project Manager, Development Manager at PBOT. Lots of titles there, thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Alex.
Great, thank you, President Pearson. Sean and Mauricio will be giving most of this presentation. It's very loud. But I just want to start, if you go to the next slide, please, with a quick note that the Montgomery Park Streetcar is identified in the high capacity transit strategy as a tier 1 regional priority investment near-term corridor, alongside 2 other projects that you are going to be asked to endorse the LPAs for, 82nd Avenue and TV Highway. And we're just a little bit behind those 2, but we're very excited to be working alongside them and bringing this important project to you. With that, I'll turn it over to my partners at the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
Good morning.
Mauricio Leclerc, I'm a planning manager at PBOT. I've been working on streetcar issues for a long time.
Yep, thanks.
Working with
I don't think it's on.
No, working.
Can you use another one?
Here.
Sure. Feels like I'm picking up somebody else. Okay, here we go.
Here we go.
All right. So I'm Mauricio Leclerc. I'm a planning manager at PBOT. I've been working on streetcar issues since 2005. So the next slide, I think, provides a little bit of a background of how we got here. Streetcar was the first line developed in 2001. We learned a lot from there. We have done extensions into South Waterfront, and we've seen the development of the Pearl District, South Waterfront, ESCO, which is in Northwest here, very close to streetcar. So we know the track record of what it can do to advance our policies, get people out of their cars, and lead to a TOD, transit into development. We have thousands of units, new units as a result of streetcar, billions of dollars of investment, including hundreds of affordable housing, regulated affordable housing units in the central city. And it's the 3rd busiest transit line in the state. So as a great track record, we want to build on that. So we developed the streetcar concept plan in 2008. And since then, we have progressed to where we are today. Some of the lines made it to the TSP, our transportation system plan, and then in 2023 into the financially constrained regional transportation plan. Since then, we worked with the Bureau of Planning and Prosper Portland to upzone this area that Sean is going to provide more details on. So we work with EPS, we work with Prospect Portland, and we work with Portland Streetcar. We have Dan Bauer, the executive director. We work very closely with them. And we have, in last December, City Council adopted a package, a full plan for a comprehensive new neighborhood in this area. That includes the transportation elements, land use changes. We went from largely industrial to mixed use. And we have a host of investments to transform in the next 20 years the way we have done this in other parts of the inner part of Portland. Key elements of this, as the spine of the whole thing, is the streetcar project that we have before you and the locally preferred alternative. And I'll pass it on with that to Sean, who will provide more details about it.
Thank you, Mauricio. Good morning, councilors. My name is Sean Canny. I'm a transportation planner at the Portland Bureau of Transportation. Next slide, please. A suite of implementation tools will be utilized to implement the Montgomery Park Area Plan. The Montgomery Park Area Plan is the plan in which the streetcar project is a central recommended project. The suite include those land use changes, the investment in streetcar and other infrastructure improvements, and a unique public-private benefits agreement between the City of Portland, Portland Streetcar, Inc., and the large share property owners in the area. Combined, these will advance both regional and city goals. The project will help advance the 2040 growth concept by focusing growth along the main street of Northwest 23rd Avenue and in an extension of Portland's Northwest Town Center. The project will also make up part of and is connected to the broader regional transit network. The project will also support the development of housing and jobs in a high opportunity area of Portland. Thousands of new jobs are projected for the area, and that public benefits agreement includes the provision of 200 affordable units up front, as well as 400 middle wage jobs on site. The project will also advance equity. It will increase transit access and multimodal options in one of the most transit-dependent areas of the state of Oregon. And the public benefits agreement also includes the requirement for the commemoration of York, the enslaved member of the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery, who was critical to its success, and for whom York Street in the area and the new plan district within the Montgomery Park Area Plan itself are named. And finally, the project will help advance climate goals. It will help support high-density growth in an area where people can meet their needs without a car. And the streetcar project itself will be an emission-free transit mode, connecting people to destinations nearby and throughout the regional transit network. Next slide, please. More than 5 years of community engagement shaped the Montgomery Park Area Plan and the locally preferred alternative for the project. The first phase was conducted as part of the Montgomery Park to Hollywood Land Use and Development Strategy, or MP2H as it was known, which was funded in part through Metro by a transit-oriented development grant from the FTA. In Northwest, that involved to the Montgomery Park Area Plan. During phase one, we convened a project working group, we held open houses, and we funded outreach through community-based organizations in the area, including Friendly House, the Northwest Industrial Business Association, and the Columbia Corridor Association. During phase two, which began after some time working on plan refinements, we reintroduced the streetcar project to the public through mailers, an online open house, canvassing, meetings, and one-on-one conversations. We conducted intercept surveys on and around near-regulated affordable housing and existing transit stations in Northwest Portland, and we also held meetings with the York Collective through the Portland Harbor Community Coalition, who convened and sought to elevate the voices of the collective, whose membership includes Black Portlanders and allies interested in elevating the legacy of York, as well as equitable development opportunities in the area and in Portland more broadly. Next slide, please. The locally preferred alternative, of course, itself describes the transit mode, the alignment, and the approximate station locations for the extension. In this case, the LPA for the project is a 0.65-mile one-way route extension of the existing north-south line, or NS line, of Portland Streetcar from its existing terminus at Northwest 23rd Avenue and Northwest Northrop Street to a new terminus near the intersection of Northwest 26th Avenue and Northwest Wilson Street. The extension will use two-way movement, north-south on Northwest 23rd Avenue, and a new parallel one-way couplet using Northwest Roosevelt Street westbound, Northwest 26th Avenue southbound, and Northwest Wilson Street eastbound. Station locations include Northwest 23rd Avenue in Raleigh, both northbound and southbound locations, as well as roughly at Northwest 25th Avenue and Northwest Roosevelt Street, and the end of line station is near 26th Avenue on Northwest Wilson Street. Next slide, please. In addition to the streetcar infrastructure, the project itself also includes the rehabilitation of Northwest 23rd Avenue between Northwest Vaughn Street and Northwest Lovejoy Street, including stormwater, accessibility, and utility upgrades. It also includes multimodal extensions of Northwest Roosevelt Street, Northwest Wilson Street, and Northwest 25th Avenue. And this graphic, those are in that pinkish purple color. We'll also be purchasing up to 12 hybrid off-wire capable streetcars as part of this project to support the extension, as well as to support continued streetcar system operations, as most of Portland's streetcars' existing fleet is reaching its end of useful life. And an important note there is that the project, to help save costs and to help limit impacts in the right-of-way, is planned to be 100% off-wire, utilizing proven battery technology, which significantly reduces costs and area impacts. Next slide, please. We're currently working on finalizing a funding strategy for the project. The total project cost estimate, including the purchase of those vehicles, is currently $195 million. We had previously shared an estimate of $119 million publicly. That number is still correct. That's just the project cost without those vehicles. The addition of those vehicles allows us to utilize federal funds toward their purchase, essentially allowing us to double our money for those purchases. We currently have $42 million committed in local funding. $30 million of that is a grant from the Portland Clean Energy Fund towards streetcar replacement. And then PBOT's Capital Investment Committee also approved the allocation of $12 million for streetcar planning and project development for the project. With that, we're also pursuing an FTA Small Starts grant, which we're expecting to fund about 50% of the project. And we are currently pursuing Metro RUFA new project bond as well, which we'll hear about soon. But all combined, we're currently looking at a $4.5 million funding gap, so around 2% of the project, which we will address in future phases through project development, whether through engineering or other sources. And with that, I will pass it back to Mauricio to briefly describe the timeline for project delivery.
Thank you, Sean. Basically, where we are now, as soon as council adopted the plan, we work with TriMet, and we appreciate the help to get us into the federal register. So this project is in project development, and it's in the with the Federal Trans Administration. So here you see the timeline. We'll have we're working on 2 requests for proposals, one for the vehicles, which is a separate thing, and it takes years to design and build, and another one for engineering services and for NEPA services as part of this project. And we'll have Metro help us with this, as they are NEPA experts. Then we'll go into several years of design and get our paperwork and submit it to the feds for review, a rating, and eventually an award, right? And then we'll have the last couple of years for construction, with opening year in 2030. That's basically what we hope to do. And with that, I'll pass it on to Alex.
Yeah, if you go to the next slide, please, as our last slide, just wanted to really quickly touch on the endorsement timeline. We've been bringing a version of this presentation to the other Metro committees, and we've started requesting recommendations for endorsements. We've received recommendations from TPAC and MTAC. Tomorrow we'll be at MPACT, and Thursday we'll be at JPACT. And then we'll be coming back to you all next month requesting your endorsement of the LPA, and later this year coming back alongside East 2nd Avenue and TV Highway for a request for an RTPA amendment for all of those projects. I'm happy to open up then for any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilors, any questions? Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, President Peterson. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really want to uplift and appreciate the attention to affordable housing and doing that first. I do have one question. When it comes to labor partnership, and I looked at the timeline, what is your timeline on establishing any project labor agreements or any agreements with labor around the construction of this new project?
Good question. That's part of the implementation of it. But certainly, PBOT, we have standard procedures for which we're going to be using and utilizing labor as the implementation happens. I don't, we're a little bit too early for that to provide a detailed answer with that, but we will proceed with the standards that we have.
I come from, it's never too early to reach out.
Yeah, of course.
It's never too early. So earlier the better, to be quite honest.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? I do have one question and probably two in the weeds, but it's where my brain went. I see Counselor Wong has a question, but let me ask this. The intersection of Vaughn Highway 30 on-ramp 23rd is already a disaster. And it literally an accident waiting to happen. I don't know what the safety record is there, but now you're introducing streetcar, more pedestrians, bicyclists, and freeway traffic. At least from the mindset of the driver, I'm now entering the highway system, right? What elements of design are you putting in there to improve that intersection?
Yes, that's as most interchanges in the state and within the city and the freeway loop here. It is a challenging, it's not ideal, right? And there are limits as to what we can do. One of the things we did a lot of traffic analysis to understand the impacts of things. Of course, put in thousands of new units.
Yeah.
How did that work? Well, we did some traffic analysis and we made it work. Basically, this interchange, which is congested, has another one 6 blocks to the north, where Highway 30 becomes Yeon, Front Avenue, and so forth. So a lot of the traffic that it uses now this interchange will transition to the one to the north as the area grows. So that's how we handle the growth of the area. Of course, getting people to bike and ride transit, and streetcar and build with less parking is part of the strategy. So that also helps. And finally, we have modifications to the interchange. Some of the movements that you see now, like southbound, eastbound, will be prohibited because you can go, to the north at 6 blocks. So it actually will help the operations of it, the safety of it. Of course, it's going to continue to be a busy interchange, but I think it'll be manageable. And certainly we're concerned not just because it is busy, but also because we want the streetcar to go through, right? So by simplifying the interchange, we're providing more green time for north-south movement, which may help what you're talking about. And it will also help streetcar punch. At the same time, it will continue to be a busy interchange.
Thank you. Are there any actual design elements to keep to make sure that drivers are going the right speed, like any narrowing, any changes in the angles
Yes,
so
there
that
will
they can
be-
actually see pedestrians?
Yeah, there will be a
Okay.
tightening of things, there will be new infrastructure, wherever we touch, we are rehabilitating the road. So we will make it, putting in better infrastructure, tighter corners and such.
Okay,
In addition, we're going to provide better pedestrian, where we can, pedestrian access north-south, particularly on the side that PIVA controls, which is the west side, and allow people to go up. Additionally, as part of the plan, 1 block to the west, 24th, we're certainly making it better as part of several plans that we've been working on to make it more bike-friendly and pedestrian-friendly. So just 1 block to the west, you'll also see, basically now it's an industrial area, it will transition to be more as a part of the neighborhood. And for that, Vaughn will transition to be, for what it is now, almost like a barrier, to be more of another street that is permeable for people to go up and down.
awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilor Wong.
Yep, thank you, Madam President, and thank you for the thorough presentation. This is probably the 4th time I've seen it, so that might be, why there's less questions than usual, because you've done a very good job of, engagement and planning. And one of the times I saw this presentation was at our MPAC meeting pretty recently, and there was, almost unanimous support. I think the main concern was the loss of industrial land. And, I think the way it was portrayed was once it's gone forever, which is not really, completely accurate. But there is a loss of regional industrial land. I guess I'm wondering what your response would be to that comment and, small criticism is like, what is happening at that industrial land? What does that mean for the city and the region? And are you mitigating that loss in any way?
Well, the The change in land use was a decision that was made by the city council and also has been made by Metro. So it's been already codified in it. But so here is not quite a part of the LPA, but I can tell you that we had a very robust conversation with the community and internally and with the Bureau of Planning. And we took very seriously the need to preserve industrial land. The original area was twice as large. It included almost an equal part symmetrically on the east side. And we decided as part of the public process and analysis that we needed to not include that area, made the project better. So it is a tension, right? It just so happens that a lot of the area already is zoned for mixed use. So we were just building on what's already kind of happening, you know. A great opportunity happened in which this project can actually, working with property owners, can bring so much of the benefits that we all want in affordable housing, people, you know, TOD, people not using their cars so much, but also within the public benefits agreement, there are commitments, as Sean mentioned, for working, you know, for living wage jobs. I mean, not just necessarily be industrial, but we turn, I guess, the problem into jobs. And I think that's part of the commitment that we have. The property owners themselves are industrialists, so they were very keen in trying to preserve some of that and provide opportunities for people moving into, you know, to continue that for generations.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Yeah,
Mauricio, I'll just add, one of the answers at that impact meeting was that the existing industrial owners are going to be able to maintain that industrial use or expand on their sites if they desire to do so. So they're not prohibiting that use immediately.
Yeah. There's also a buffer in the north. You know, we're keeping some industrial so that Nikolai, you know, it works well for industrial uses, but also for freight access.
great, thank you. Yeah, I was just, you know, was interesting in that impact conversation because I think there's such a strong like sentiment of like we want to have local control and local jurisdictions should be able to do zoning, you know, in a way that, you know, their elected bodies see fit, except for when it comes to industrial land for some reason. But yeah, thank you for taking that seriously.
Awesome.
Thanks, Madam
I'm
President.
sorry, Counselor. Yeah, Counselor Nolan.
We're,
I didn't have my glasses.
this is a fabulous project. It's really important for this part of Portland. As we look at the map, though, to support the development along the route, I'd like to know, have you, and if so, how have you already coordinated with the permitting process so that the opportunity to develop property in your grayed out area in particular to meet the thousands of housing units, the affordable housing units, the jobs? Have you taken steps to expedite that permitting process because you have to do all that planning anyway?
Great question. In the plan itself, that's why this is not just a one-off, it's part of an integrated plan. So we have a master plan so where the new streets are likely to be with some flexibility to the north, you know, because, you know, it may take decades to get there. But in the south part where this area that is highlighted, it's very clear what we want to do and who pays for it. In this case, largely property owners. But also what this project does is create the infrastructure to support the adjacent property. Because now what we have is pouring, you know, industrial lands, and some of them are not even streets, so they're going to be dedicated to the project. And at the end of it, we're going to have a couplet, like in South Waterfront in the Pearl District, and from which people can be building on sites. And you already have the infrastructure, you already have the water lines and the utilities for the right size, so that you can build several blocks at the same time, including a park, including the 200 units of affordable housing. So I think we have an integrated program, which this project will build. You know, and from then, the property owners and the people who will be paying into it, they have the incentive to not just pay for it, but actually make use of it by building quickly, like is happening in the Pearl District and South Waterfront.
If I might be a little more direct.
Sure.
And I recognize I'm speaking with PBOT and not all city bureaus, but now that you're all one big happy executive family, Portland doesn't have the greatest reputation for expediting permit review and permit approval. Can this be a project that is utilized to change that dynamic and streamline PBOC connecting with BDS and connecting with water and sewer so that you cut 6 months or more off the permitting process? That will incentivize
Yeah.
investment in real development.
I cannot speak for the whole city, but I really hope so. From our end, we will do our best to, as I mentioned, we are working with water and BES, are now partners in our larger infrastructure family to make sure this is ready to go, ready to build. We will have everything ready. As development happens, as new building happen, we will make sure that we know exactly where the water line goes so that we build around it. And I truly hope that the provision of affordable housing now is an incentive for all of us to work hard, because we have it in our plan agreement. It would be a shame, wouldn't it, that we take so long to actually make it happen, not because the developers don't want it, but because we take so long. So I will take that energy back to our shop and try to make it happen as fast as possible.
Thank you.
Seeing no more hands raised, I'll just say in kind of conclusion, I think you've got a lot of support here for this project and the importance of it. And just to echo Councilor Nolan's comments, I'm getting confirmation on these numbers because it was a ChatGPT request for information. But our region compared to other regions, City of Portland compared to other major cities that are our same type, we are at 60% plus or minus single family housing of our housing stock. Similar regions are in the mid 40s.
Mm-hmm.
We need this. We are in a housing crisis, and I don't want to put the whole burden on the City of Portland, but you have an immense project you're undertaking, and it's extremely important. So whatever we can do to help expedite this, I think is really important, because we need to change those numbers, and we cannot, the status quo just can't stay. Right. So I would just echo that and say, again, I think this council will be very interested in helping with whatever we can do. Oh, Councilor Gonzalez.
I mean, I'll make it to that point. This project has been one of the key fixtures of the regional flexible funds bond that JPACT is considering alongside leadership of the council. So absolutely, I think Metro is recognizing the value of the project, and absolutely agree with Councilor Nolan that there's such a great opportunity here to make the systems work and to do what we want to do to deliver a project that will make a huge impact for the region. So just wanted to wrap up, put a bow on it, and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you in
Thank
July.
you very much. Great questions.
All right. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the I-5 Interstate Bridge MTIP amendment presentation. And this is a major project we are all familiar with. No action is requested at today's work session, but instead it is an opportunity for council to review and discuss an amendment to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. We'll consider adoption of this amendment in July, and we have with us Metro and the Interstate Bridge team. I will kick it off to Jean Senegal-Biggs, Resource Development Section Manager, and welcome the Project Manager for the IBR, Greg Johnson, and both teams. Thanks.
Terrific. Good morning. We've got some slides. Thank you. Good morning, Council and President Peterson. I'm Jean Seneschal-Biggs, Resource Development Manager here at Metro. I'm part of the team that manages the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, what we call the MTIP. We're here today with an overview of a formal amendment for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, or the IBR program. It's a bundle of 3 projects, amending an existing project in the MTIP and then adding 2 new projects to replace and reconstruct the existing I-5 Columbia River Bridge and the related interchanges. The combined amendment totals about $1.9 billion. So I have a few slides to present. And I'm going to move through them pretty quickly, and then I'm going to hand it over to the folks from the IBR program, and they'll share more with you about the investments through this amendment. Next slide. So there's a lot of information in your packet related to this amendment, including the draft resolution and the MTIP worksheets, along with a staff report. There's no approval action for you today. That happens next month after JPAC votes on an approval request. So we're here today just with an overview of the amendment, and it's a time for you to ask questions before you take action next month. Next slide. So here's a high-level summary of the 3 projects in the bundle. Key number 21570 is the existing project in the MTIP, the one on the left column. And that's for non-construction activities. That includes design, and then now is proposing to add right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation activities. And then key numbers 23876 and 23877 on the right, those are the 2 new projects. One for the construction related to pre-construction tolling, and one for construction of the new replacement bridge. Next slide. So also included in your packet is a draft memo describing Metro's major project assessment evaluation, what we call a PAE. Metro performed this analysis because the proposed amendment is over $100 million, and it includes capacity increasing investments. The PAE includes an assessment of the 2024 to 2027 MTIP investment package with a full build IBR program across the 5 RTP policy priorities. You know them as safe system, equitable transportation, climate action and resilience, mobility options, and thriving economy. So I just want to pause here and make it clear. It's really important to note that this analysis is not a corridor project level analysis. Instead, it's an analysis of the proposed IBR program of projects, the full build out, added to our current suite of 109 projects across the region that are programmed in our adopted MTIP. So the outputs for this analysis are for the entire area within the Metro jurisdiction, or the MPA. So because we're amending the MTIP, we're focused on how this project performs within the MTIP. Okay, so I just want to make sure you're clear on that. The results of the evaluation are both in a quick reference table and a detailed analysis in the memo. So let's go to the next slide. So we're bringing this to you in what we call a 2-touch process. Again, there's no approval action for you today. That happens next month after JPAC has voted on an approval recommendation to bring forward to you. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the IBR team. They can introduce themselves.
Good morning, Madam President, members of the Metro Council. My name is Greg Johnson. I'm the Program Administrator for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. I have with me Assistant Program Administrator Ray Mabey and our Community Advisory Group leader, Lynn Valenter. So we're going to make a quick run through and update you on where the program is at, and talk about what this milestone that we're seeking really means for this region. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this program has a number of partners. And once again, we are blessed by having 2 federal co-leads on this, both Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. We also have 2 DOTs, ODOT and WashDOT. And we have co-leads on this project, TriMet, C-Tran, the 2 transit agencies, as well as Metro and the Southwest Region Transportation Council in Southwest Washington. Both cities are partners, as well as both ports are partners to this endeavor. So this timeline that you see on the slide talks about the program launch, where the 2 previous governors, Governor Brown and Governor Inslee, came together and relaunched this effort that has been ongoing for 25 years, stalled in 2013, 2014. They relaunched it in 2019 and dubbed it the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. So we have been working since that time period to get this program through the planning phases and into construction. So this milestone that we're asking you to consider next month is a milestone that will take us into construction. So what we have done in 2021, we reconfirmed the purpose and need through community engagement. We also, in 2022, received $1 billion commitment from the state of Washington, which was a tremendously important milestone. And in 2022, we also had all of the partners unanimously endorse the modified locally preferred alternative, another huge step in moving this program forward. 2023, we saw the commitment from the state of Oregon with another $1 billion being added to the funding sources. And in 2024, last fall, we went through a draft supplemental environmental impact statement process where we received over 10,000 comments that we are working through to craft the final supplemental environmental impact and seeking a record of decision sometime early in 2026. That record of decision will allow us to then go into construction and start procuring contractors and designers for the bridge itself and the enabling projects that lead up to the bridge. So this is one of many times we will be back before this council with amendments for the MTIP. This is just the first of many that you will see. So one of the things that we are most proud of is our engagement with the community. For 4.5 years, we have had advisory groups. We've had a community advisory group as well as an equity advisory group that has met on a monthly basis to advise the program on how we can engage better the community, how we can make sure that voices who traditionally have not been heard on programs like this are heard in this program. So I'd like to go to the next slide and introduce Lynn Valenter, who is one of our co-chairs of the Community Advisory Group, to talk about her experience and the experience of the Community Advisory Group with this program. So next slide, please. Lynn.
Thank you. So all of you are charged with governance of essentially millions of people. If we count the people who rely on that bridge, it's a huge charge. Part of why I'm here is to put a more personal face on that, as represented through myself and the other members of the Community Advisory Board. I was deeply disappointed 15 years ago when the first bridge initiative failed. However, if my colleague, my counterpart, were here, he would say that it's one of many initiatives because he has even greater history and can validate that we've been talking about replacing this bridge for longer than, in fact, I can remember. When I was asked to co-chair the committee, I thought about it quite a bit because it was a big ask. And when I asked the length of time, I was told it was indefinite. That has played out. But when I considered taking on this role, I was thinking about what is the greatest gift I can give to my community. And I felt like the biggest impact I could have was to help get this bridge built. At that time, I had been the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations at WSU Vancouver for 25 years. I've since moved to the other side of the river. I'm at Reed College now in a similar role, but I'm still a Washington resident. So I essentially represent the Washington side of that community. I also just want to say it matters not just to us from economic development and statistics and studies, but also from a personal standpoint. I have 5 grandchildren in the Vancouver, Portland area, and they have needed to get to Randall Children's Hospital in an expeditious manner, and being able to do so with functional bridges makes a difference. My mother still lives in the home that I grew up in Southwest Portland. And as my dad was nearing end of life, us being able to get from Camas, Washington in a timely manner to Portland, Oregon mattered deeply. So this is, it makes a difference to all of us personally and collectively. So who is CAG? I'm gonna just list some of the members of our group so that you understand what a diverse and disparate group we are. We have a super commuter regularly traveling from North Clark County to Salem. We have a Northeast Portland resident and advocate for the Eastern European community, a Hayden Island resident elevating communication and participation on behalf of that community, an advocate for commercial boat traffic, workforce development experts, business leaders with operations across the Portland-Vancouver area. We have a retired planner with special interest in public transit and accommodations for all. And we have walking and biking advocates. We also have tribal representatives with particular interest in preserving elements important to their communities. So what do these disparate and intentionally diverse group members have in common? We all want to see the bridge built. And when we first started about what are our dreams and aspirations for this project, one of our members said, the best bridge is the bridge that gets built. And that's kind of been our North Star ever since. Thank you.
So thank you, Lynn. It's been my honor to work with Lynn and her partner, our friend Ed Washington, who couldn't be here this morning. But Ed is a constant reminder of the history of this region and the conscience of this region for how we can do things better, how we can be smarter in reaching out to the community. So we honor their service. It has been, it seems like a lifetime, but it's only been 4.5 years. So let's go to the next slide, please. So once again, I-5 is one of the freight most important freight corridors, not only on the West Coast, but in the country. All of the West Coast ports, all the way from San Diego up to Vancouver, British Columbia, dump traffic into the I-5 corridor to move freight. We move over $132 million a day across a bridge that is 108 years old and the other is 68 years old. So this is our challenge. We have old infrastructure that is in dire need of replacement, that the economy of this region is relying upon. One of the key things that's a purpose and need of this project is that this bridge is earthquake vulnerable. We know that the Cascadia subduction sits off the coast of Oregon, and if it moves in a significant way, we don't know that this bridge would survive that major earthquake. So we are working with time ticking to move this project forward. So, but other things that this project is doing, we're trying to make this a multimodal corridor. Currently, if you want to get through this corridor, your only options are to get in your car and drive across. Now, you can walk or you can bike across the bridge, but it is highly uncomfortable. So we're looking to make this a multimodal investment to ensure that folks don't have to rely on car and as their only means of crossing through this corridor. But also we know that the anticipated economic impact from this investment is going to be double the cost to build it. So right now we are looking at, for every $1 billion we spend on construction, we will create over 5,500 direct construction jobs and 10,900 indirect jobs that will be supported by this investment. So this is important for the economy of this area and to make sure that we have folks that are working at middle-class sustainable jobs going into the future. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the modified locally preferred alternative. This should look familiar. This is what this council approved along with your 7 other partners back in 2022. And these are the elements that we have been studying on this program moving forward. And you can see it's a very busy slide, but you can see some of the highlights. We're looking at an extension of light rail from the Expo Center across the river, ending at Evergreen Street in Vancouver. We also are looking at shared use paths across the bridge that connect bike and walk facilities on each side to make this a connected community of folks who want to use alternatives to biking or alternatives to driving. We have 3 additional light rail stations that will be built as a part of this program, one on Hayden Island, one on the waterfront of Vancouver, and a terminal station at Evergreen Street in Vancouver. So there are 7 interchanges in this corridor, and these 7 interchanges, 70% of the traffic that goes on this corridor either gets on or off on one of these 7 interchanges. So you can see that is a cause for some of the congestion as well as the safety issues that exist in this corridor. So modernizing these facilities will help the flow of traffic and the flow of freight through this corridor. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is our program schedule. We have been in that green box for a long time, and we are coming towards the end of that green box. That is our environmental processes. That's the NEPA process that we are currently going through, the National Environmental Policy Act. So we are seeking to get a record of decision sometime early in 2026 that will allow us to go into that dark orange box of construction. We have a desire to have the bridge meet a in-water work window of the fall of 2027. And that's important because if we miss that window, we miss an entire year of construction. And on a project of this size, missing that window will add over $300 million just in escalation and inflation costs. So we are focused on getting through the environmental process. We are concurrently doing a number of other things, such as working with our partners at PBOT and in Vancouver and others who have to get us permits. We are currently working on design of 30% of a number of key elements in the corridor. We are also working through a funding and grant application process for an FTA grant of $1 billion. And Ray will talk about some of the other grants that have been achieved as part of this program. Our tribal consultation has been very strong. We just had one of our monthly meetings yesterday with the Grand Ronde. So we have 10 federally recognized tribes that we are consulting with as part of this project. But once again, our underpinning of this whole endeavor is our community engagement. We are tremendously proud of the work that has been done, and you will see us at events throughout the community and around each state telling folks what this program is and what the benefits of it are. So we are reaching out anywhere and anytime we can to make folks aware of this, to get their involvement in this program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Ray Mabey, to talk about some of the funding and other issues on the program. So Ray.
Thank you, Greg. Good morning. My name is Ray Mabey, Assistant Administrator for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Pleasure to be here this morning. As Greg mentioned, we are seeking, we've achieved funding from both states. I'll go through that. And we have some grants that we have secured to date and another grant that we are continuing to work on. But I'll step through these a little bit because there's a lot of detail on this slide. The first couple rows there show the funding that both states put in to really get the program started. And then you see the next third and fourth lines. Those are those $1 billion commitments from each state that really set the stage to show that the local commitment was there to help secure those federal grants. Federal grants really like to be the last dollar in. So that move by the states to bring that commitment to bear has paid dividends, and has paid dividends in the form of 2 grants that we've secured, actually 3. First, the FHWA Bridge Investment Program grant. We've secured a grant there of $1.5 billion. I think it was the largest grant awarded in that program. Also, a $600 million US DOT mega grant. Also, I think the largest mega grant awarded for that program. Those funds are somewhat unique in that they are funds that can be spent on the highway elements as well as transit elements. So those are pretty important dollars. And then recently, Washington DOT and the city of Vancouver applied for and were awarded a Reconnecting Communities pilot grant for $30 million for the community connector that would be over I-5 and join East and West Vancouver together. Both states have given toll authority, and we are going through right now a level 3 traffic and revenue analysis to understand the latest numbers on potential net toll revenue. But we've got a range there between 1.1 and 1.6 billion. Our financial plan has targeted 1.24 billion as a reasonable target. And so all those funding pieces I just mentioned are largely in place or have been awarded. And I'll talk about the other grants in more detail. But the puzzle piece that we are still working on, as Greg mentioned, is the Federal Transit Administration New Starts Capital Improvement Grant. That is a stepped process. They have a very rigorous process to ensure delivery. And we're working through that process now. We are in program development, seek to enter engineering, which is another phase, next year, and then move into final and get a grant agreement from FTA in 2028. So it gives you an idea of the duration working together with the FTA. But that total funding gives us a reasonable funding spread to cover our current cost estimate between $5 and $7.5 billion. We are updating that estimate this summer, and we'll produce an additional financial plan to go with that to understand how we keep the program moving forward. Next slide, please. So a little more detail on those grants because I wanted to make sure you understood where those were at. We were able to secure grant agreements for the US DOT mega grant and the Federal Highway Administration Bridge Investment Program grant earlier this year. And as part of that execution of the grants, obligated small amounts of each, relatively small, $10 million out of the mega grant and just under $1 million for the BIP or Bridge Investment Program grant. And so those grant agreements have been, like I said, and executed. We do not have that quite yet on the US DOT Reconnecting Communities grant, and the capital investment grant, as I mentioned, is still underway. So we're feeling pretty good about our funding sources from our federal partners. And as seen in the US DOT Reconnecting Communities pilot grant, we will continue to find other federal sources as we move forward. Next slide, please. This is another slide of the program investments that Greg showed earlier, but it displays a different attributes. This is our conceptual packages. There are 28 packages detailed here, and the colors represent those packages. And we believe this to be our best guess or estimates at this point of the construction packages themselves and how we would organize these for delivery. Now there are 28 total, but not 28 colors on the screen. If you look at the inset, there are transit packages identified there that identify the LRT and track system stations and other facilities that need to be upgraded, as well as vehicle procurement. But the keystone project in this sequence is really the bridge. All modes cross the bridge, whether you're walking, biking, rolling, on transit, or in a truck or a car, you need that bridge. And that is the keystone from which we need to start and then build out from. And so that's why we have the amendments or the step amendments in front of you today, is to really start to animate that project as soon as possible. As Greg mentioned, we want to get in the water in 2027 for that project, which means once we have that record of decision, we want to start acquiring right of way and start getting a construction contractor on board as quickly as possible to be able to do that work. The other projects that we have on the docket today is also the pre-completion tolling. Once meaningful construction begins on that bridge, we would like to start beginning that tolling, pre-completion tolling, that starts as we toll the existing bridges while we are continuing to progress on the program. This is an important funding source. I think this pre-completion tolling before the final bridges are opened to their reasonable completion, I think nets us an additional $250 million of toll revenue. And that's pay-as-you-go revenue that we wouldn't bond against. An important funding source to keep moving the program forward. Those are the two projects that are in front of you. But the thing to note in this graph, in this diagram, is that there are many projects. They are phased out over time. We will be bringing that schedule of the sequences of the projects to an industry forum in July to share with them the opportunities for not only design or engineering side, but also construction. And once we share that, it will help us firm up our schedule to bring future STIP amendments to you to help enable the rest of the program. So we'll be back many times, probably at least once a year, to program those future projects as we move forward. A couple of those that you might see next year are the SR14A, which you can see on the Vancouver side, and then the Hayden Island A on Hayden Island, which are projects that would allow us to do the staging back and forth of traffic as we begin to construct the new bridges and need to move the freeway to one side or the other to facilitate getting traffic on the new bridges. Also, the approach contract, which is a rebuild of SR14 and a temporary interchange on Hayden Island. Those are some glimpses of what might be coming to you next year. Next slide, please. Oh, Councilor Simpson has a question.
Just real quick, while we got the map up, I'm looking at the Marine Drive portion.
Yes.
Things have changed in 4 years. So I used to be on that side of the fence, also on the CAG. But there is another project, and I'm wondering if y'all are coordinating with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District on the Marine Drive levee project.
Yeah, President Peterson, Councilor Simpson, good question. Yes, we do know that there is a levee project happening there, and we are in coordination with the what used to be the Drainage District. There's a new name there.
Yeah.
New acronym is quite lengthy. But also the Army Corps. It's their project. We meet regularly with the Army Corps as well as the district to coordinate on that project so that we are minimizing any redo of work and that we coordinate a work that helps us build the facilities that we will touch and make sure that their project is executed on time as well. So there's a lot of coordination happening to make sure that that levee, I think it's a levee ready project, is moving forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Next slide, please. So starting with the first touch point for the STIP amendment is really the existing project that we have. I think we're adding dollars there for preliminary engineering. We have a big program and need to keep funding our work to continue the design. We also need to fund right away. We're currently funding right away in a kind of a program level stage to be able to begin the right away acquisitions. As Greg mentioned, we've got 2 federal partners. Each of them have their own ways of approaching right away, and we've got a proposal in that with FTA and Federal Highway Administration to follow the Federal Highway Administration process to acquire our right away. And then we know that we'll be impacting utilities along the way throughout the corridor, and we are creating that utility relocation phase to address those relocations that need funding from the state. Next slide, please. Next is the actual replacement of the Columbia River Bridge. As I mentioned, that is our keystone project, and getting started on that is really the pivotal point for the program. And so we want to program a preliminary engineering specifically for that work, and then construction. And the construction would be for the two bridges, north and south, that do accommodate all those modes. It includes the fixed guideway for light rail and the multi-use path on the northbound structure. So as well as the vehicular lanes. So it goes basically from shoreline to shoreline, and is going to be probably the largest package that we have in the program. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we know to help us enable the pre-completion tolling, we are setting up a project for signage and gantries and systems to be able to prepare for the pre-completion tolling. Signage would be up and down the interstate to provide the appropriate notice to travelers about the tolling that they would encounter to help them help them make the appropriate decisions on their travels. And as noted here, if you've been working with any other municipalities around signage or gantries, or light poles or signal poles, these are long lead items. So getting started on these purchase of those materials is really key to make sure that we have these up at the appropriate time. Next slide, please. And I think with that, I'll turn it back over to Administrator Johnson.
All right, thank you, Ray. So we are once again pursuing this STIP amendment, both in Oregon and in Washington. So we hope to have that wrapped up by the end of July in both states. And that will allow us to continue on with some of the efforts that are ongoing. We will be, one thing that's not shown here, we will be in front of each of the partners, including Metro, with our aesthetic potential treatments for the bridge. So that's going to happen in late July and August in a series of workshops that we will be performing so folks can see some of the potential for aesthetic treatments. We also are going to be working on the cost estimate, as Ray mentioned, and a financial plan update. So we're hoping late this year we will be releasing that information and working on getting to that final supplemental environmental impact statement. That's going to be a huge milestone achievement, which will allow us to then get an amended record of decision from our federal partners that will allow the start of construction sometime in 2026. So with that, I think our next slide is our how to stay connected with us. We have a great website of information that has all of our previous meetings, and we have a monthly newsletter, as well as folks can come and visit us. We have office hours that we invite folks to come in. And as I tell folks, we just don't want our friends coming in. We want folks who disagree with us to come in and talk to us about how to make this program better. So our social media presence is very robust. So anyone can find out about this bridge. We seek to be transparent in how we move forward on this program. So with that, I will end our presentation and we will take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Counselors, any questions? Counselor Gonzalez?
Sure. Well, I'm very glad to see this come through and for the proactive engagement from the project team. Lynn, I really appreciated the line that you shared. I'm like engraving it in my mind. The best bridge is the bridge that gets built. It also happens to be the bridge that includes light rail, right? So anyway, sorry, that's like an editorial note for me. But you know, JPAC has been tracking this project very diligently. And so I appreciate all the hard work on that. Another thing that really stood out to me, Greg, was the slide about 5,000 jobs are spent and 10,000 indirect jobs. I mean, this is a project that will last years and years, and will be several $1 billion, right? And so I think thinking about the economic impact of that. From that vantage point, I'm curious, my question is along the lines of the workforce, and of this project is not just an economic development for our country, but it is an opportunity to activate our local building trades, our local workforce, activate apprenticeship programs, help people engage in the economy in a time where our city, our region desperately needs opportunity. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you're using either the community benefits agreement process and or the partnerships that are being developed and activated to make sure that the people that are growing up here or the people that own businesses here that make the steel or whatever have an opportunity to really take advantage of this generational project.
Well, thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. This is tremendously important to the program. We have, one of the first things we did several years ago was have a workforce study to understand what the needs for this program will be and how we can help meet those needs. So we have that study in it's in our front pocket, not in our back pocket, to understand how we can engage the local workforce and strengthen it and bring the skill sets necessary to achieve a project like this. So that's one of the foundational things we did. But we have been reaching out to labor. We have a group that is meeting with our labor partners on a monthly basis to talk about pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs for folks who are local here and how we can prioritize communities that have not had opportunities to work on programs like this. So those are our keystones. You mentioned our community benefits advisory group. That group also created elements of their request along the lines of how do we reach into the community and make sure that the community is reflected in the workforce that is building this project. So those things are key elements of how we plan to move this forward. We are working with groups such as NAMAC, OWAMI, Latino Built, to make sure that this is reflective of folks, once again, who haven't had opportunities to work on programs like this.
Thanks. And just to wrap it up, because I know we have everyone has their hands up. I've been thinking a lot about this really big, I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, but I've been thinking a lot about this question of what's the promise of the American dream given everything happening in our country, which we will not address I think that, and we all probably have a definition of what the lore of the American dream is to us and our families. But I think right now, what the current generation and the next generation is really asking themselves is this tenet around to me, the American dream is this idea that my kids will have a better future than me. They will make more than me. They'll have more opportunities, et cetera. And I think that this current generation is asking themselves, is that promise still exist for me? And I think about us as stewards at Metro, one of the project partners for a project like this is how can we help projects that not just activate workforce and economic opportunity, but also position our region for the global economy in the next century. So anyway, just really high level reflection, putting it back on you guys. And I hope that what comes across is as I engage with this as a transportation leader, that's the spirit of which we approach it. See the spirit of which I talk about it with my constituents. And I hope it's something that the project team takes away to really think about. So thank you.
And I will take a moment to reflect with you. One of the first things that that when I got here, we had key team members who educated me on the history of this area. And like I said, I'm not from the Pacific Northwest, not from Portland. And I had team members who educated me on some of the history. Folks like John L. Bell, Ed Washington, talked to me about how the Vanport flood, how Albina, and how other elements were destroyed by transportation. So one of the things that this program has strived to do is make sure we understand that history and that we are not repeating that history, that we are actually moving to, we can't solve all of the problems that were created by our forebears in the transportation industry, but we can make sure that we are not adding to the burden of communities that have suffered because of some of the previous decisions that were made around transportation infrastructure. So that is a keystone and very important to this program.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Counselor Simpson, then Rosenthal, Lewis, and Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. And coming back around, I really want to uplift and appreciate the tribal consultation work that you all have done. I think it's vital, particularly in that lower Columbia River piece, because there's so many project timelines and successive projects happening. There's one I do want to ask you about, the Cascade Renewable Transmission Project. And if it's supposed to take place around the same time as this project is supposed to break ground, as I think about that, and I think about our tribes, I think about CritFig. I'm sure y'all talking with them, right? Hopefully, if you ain't,
We are.
better, right? How are we working with our indigenous tribes in the area around like the disruption in natural resources, either salmon runs, access to the land, access to the river, and talking with the tribes around that? And who do you have doing that? Because I want our people to hear that so that they know who to talk to.
So we have our tribal liaison, person by the name of Cassandra Rippey, who is our lead in working with all of the tribal governments. She has been fantastic. She has a great history of working with tribal governments. So we are hearing their concerns about disruption to the river itself and the future health of the river. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that never gets enough attention, in my opinion, is we are actually taking, right now, every drop of stormwater that hits that bridge and the surrounding infrastructure goes directly into the Columbia River, carrying rubber tire debris,
brake
fluids, everything that rinses off that roadway goes directly into that will ensure the future health of the Columbia River in this area. And we think that's important. The tribe has acknowledged that as one of the more important aspects of this project. We are hearing them on the planting of native species. We will be disrupting certain amounts of wetlands. We're working with the tribes to make sure that our wetland mitigation bank is robust and that they will have access to some of the areas that will be mitigated. So these are things, just a few of the things. And we know the tribes have great concerns about disruption to the land and the surrounding areas for native artifacts and remains. So we are being very careful and intentional in working with the tribes to address these areas in our programmatic agreements with the tribes.
Thank you for that, Greg. And I do want to say, like, again, you know, we got to get it right, particularly with this in this conversation. And I do want to uplift. I mean, obviously, this is probably going to be the biggest project many in my generation and future generations will work on for some time. And so, like, making sure, again, that the labor aspects of this is not only lifted up, but also how we source our material, who's overseeing the work, project managing, all of that, making sure that that is also wrapped up into some of those project labor agreements.
Understood.
And if I could add, Councilor Simpson, one of the things that we've done on the workforce front and tribal engagement is to craft new agreements for taro rights and to expand Oregon's model for taro into Washington for the purpose of the bridge. Washington's taro agreements have been focused on work specifically on reservation lands and not the same model that Oregon has when it's within a certain radius. And so we're crafting agreements between, between the two states and the tribes that are interested in this to provide and develop workforce and provide workers for the program as we move forward. So we think that's a significant step forward in expanding that type of program.
That's great.
Thank y'all. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Councilor Rosenthal, Lewis, and Huang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank Greg for coming down and doing a briefing on a lot of the issues. I still have some technical questions, but I think I can get those answered offline, such as what utilities and when are we going to be putting in, who is going to be collecting the information and data. But I wanted to tee, and I appreciate that Councilors Gonzalez and Simpson mentioned the workforce agreements. I also want to key in on, as you know, that one of the questions I asked about, two concerns that I have, is the aesthetics of the bridge, particularly one because of its potential impact on downtown Vancouver, for which they've spent a lot of effort and a lot of time trying to get this right. The other one has to do with the tribal cultural. As you know, the Columbia River is not just sort of our history, it's also tribal history, and the runs of salmon. It's the most important salmon river in probably the world. And I think that it's historic, long-term cultural, historic importance, both, and that impacts tribes all the way through the West, including into Canada, because it is a major pathway for salmon as well as lamprey and other fish. So I hope that in the process, I appreciate the comments you made about aesthetic treatments, but I hope at some point we can find some way to recognize the fact that it's not just a highway bridge, it's also a bridge over a major transportation corridor. Remember, the Northwest was founded by a transportation corridor coming down Lewis and Clark, coming down the Columbia River. So I hope there is some way that can be memorialized in this bridge, because it should be a marquee bridge, not just another bridge. And I think that that's fairly important to the cultural history of the entire Northwest. And then I do have one serious question. This is a big project and it has a lot of elements and it's going to have a lot of phases. What processes are going to be in place to limit the number of cost overruns or, double work performance, things like that can often happen in complex projects like this? There's many reasons for cost overruns. What procedures are in place to ensure that we get, it's not going to be the cheapest, but at least the best project we can for the kind of money we spend?
So I'll tackle that last question first. The first enemy of a mega project's budget is time. If we don't hit deadlines, we are incurring out in 2035 $1 million a day in just inflation and escalation costs. So the key for this project to meet budget goals is to stay on schedule. So we are tremendously focused on that issue, but we will have other means in place to be looking at cost containment. We are working and studying what's going on the Brent Spence Bridge in Cincinnati, between Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. We're looking at the Francis Scott Key Bridge, other mega projects around the country to understand how they are looking at cost containment, what are the best practices. So we will be having value engineering to look at how do you best build this bridge, achieve all of the goals, but do it in a way that is saving dollars overall. So having the right delivery method is for some of the programs or some of the things that we are looking at as another cost savings to make sure that we are having cooperative type agreements rather than contracting methods that set opposition between owners and the contractors themselves. So those are just a few of the things. But I do want to address the aesthetics issue. We early on brought on a firm that is world-renowned for their aesthetic treatments for infrastructure. This is a group out of London, England called Knight Architecture. And they have participated on some of the most signature bridges and infrastructure pieces around the world. These are the folks that will be coming here in person in August to meet with the partners to talk about and roll out their elements that they have taken into consideration. They understand the history. They have done great research on the history of this region. So we think and we are anticipating a great set of concepts that they will roll out to us later this summer.
And there's a design charrette, or there's a meeting of the executive
Yes.
committee to go over those, right?
Yes.
Coming up.
And I would just be remiss if I didn't say it, but I've often suggested that the bridge get a name in some future time and it be called the Salmon Gateway Bridge, because it is a major salmon gateway.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis and then Wong, and I just want to do a time check. We're trying to finish this out plus or minus noon because we have so much to talk about with SHS, so not to rush you.
Okay, great, thank you. I will condense all my questions into one. I do appreciate, we had the opportunity to talk just recently, so I feel very good about the direction of the project. The leadership that you've shown, particularly with 2 federal agencies, 2 states, 2 cities, multiple stakeholders who want to run different directions, and you bring us all back together. My kind of question, well, I have 2 questions. One, in terms of where you have put tribal consultation in your presentation, it seems a little bit subservient to stakeholder engagement. I just want to clarify that it's separate and it's a formal process that actually probably belongs more along the lines of your list of governments that are on your kind of approval list, along with bodies like ourselves. And then my second kind of note for today is just, we didn't talk about light rail enough. And I think for me, that's an integral part of this. And I understand that it's a separate structure, but it's one package. And I would like us to be a little bit more light rail forward when talking about how people are going to move across the river.
Understood. So let's talk about the tribal engagement. We do not treat the tribes as stakeholders. The tribes are sovereign nations, and we do consider this government to government consultation. So we're working diligently to make sure that the tribal government's voices are heard and reflected in the decision making on this program. So we take that tremendously serious. They are not subservient to any of the other processes that we have moving forward. We've been out and visited the tribal lands and had great conversations back and forth. We've been as far out as Yakima, and we've gone Grand Ronde, Cowlitz, and Warm Springs. So we will continue to do that diligent outreach to these sovereign entities as we move forward. Regarding light rail is, we consider this a essential element to this program moving forward. Right now, our projections show that there will be a desire for between 170 and 180,000 trips per day through this corridor out in 2045. We cannot build highways wide enough to accommodate that without ripping out half of downtown Vancouver and Fort Vancouver, without seriously damaging Hayden Island. So we know that we have to find alternative ways for folks to move through the corridor. Light rail is the most efficient way to make that happen. So that is a key element to how this program moves forward.
Great, thank you. Counselor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. And yeah, thank you for threading the needle on so many levels. I think when we consider MTIP amendment next month, that it's a really conversation around how we will eventually pay for the bridge. And I was hoping, amongst the critical elements, you could talk a little bit more about the tolling plans behind it. I know it's always a sensitive subject, but I've been reading the press about there's a delay in the process. There was also someone that claimed that tolling would be $20 a trip. And I also just wanted to make sure that we're still focused on having a low income program. So I understand we have to pay for a bridge, but we need to make it as accessible to working folks as much as possible. So where are we at?
Okay, I'm going to ask Assistant Administrator Ray Mabee to address the tolling issue.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the question. To getting into the I guess, perceived delay of tolling, and I think there was recent action by the Washington Transportation Commission to land on that tolling date. And that is really responsive to a couple of things, and it's our NEPA schedule. And as Greg mentioned, we are working to get that record of decision early next year. However, and that's a schedule that was given to us by our Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration partners, is that we had seen a lot of questions around the modeling that we worked together along with Metro and RTC that took some extra time to get cleared up with our federal partners. That did shift our rod out to where we see it today. And the record of decision is kind of that tipping point for all the other studies that would lead into tolling. And so as we look at the construction activities to actually get there, we can't build those until we have the record of decision. So that timing does lead to have the pre-completion tolling start in, I think, mid-2027. Yes. And so we've lined up the associated studies for the traffic and revenue studies, the level 3 traffic and revenue study that would help lead to the bonding decisions. But the bi-state commissions, bi-state committee between the commissions have met and set the scenarios to be studied under a level 3 traffic and revenue study. And in each of those scenarios, they've included a low income discount, and they've also are planning to study tribal exemptions. So I know that those two things have been some key goals for our partners on looking at equitable approaches towards tolling, and those toll policies and rates are set by the commissions themselves. And I can't remember exactly the upper end of the toll rates that they're studying in this new level 3 recommended models, but it is nowhere near as $20. It's likely of at least a fourth of that. Yeah, something like $4.60. So yeah, that I'm not sure where that number came from or how it got propagated, but it is not accurate.
Oh, well, I read some articles about,
yeah,
there was a independent expert that came up with that number. And yeah, what's the status of the low income program? Yeah, I think if we wanted to visit family members expediently, having that bridge is important, but being able to access the bridge without, monetary concerns is also really important. So
Yeah, like I said,
Is that being worked on?
that low income program is, and that policy decision is up to the commissions. And they will have to make that decision to support that low income discount. It's encouraging to see that every scenario that they're studying does include that discount. And so while I can't speak for the commissions, it does seem like they are headed that direction.
Okay. Just a quick question to follow up. Normally the legislature of Washington State gives the Washington State Transportation Commission the authority to go up to a certain cap on the toll. Is that where that $20 number came from, or what is the cap?
That might be where that got back calculated. I think the
I
Washington
highly doubt that that's
legislature,
the number, but
yeah, did up the potential toll revenue to quite a bit, 2.5 billion.
yeah, but
And
normally
so-
they say, up to $12 or something.
And so that may be where they back calculated that, but that is a latitude that the Washington legislature recently did, but that's not what the program is currently studying.
Thank you. Just to wrap this up, I just want to personally thank both Lynn and Ed, former Metro Councilor Ed Washington, for all of the time and effort that you've put into making this the best project for folks on the ground in and around the project. So thank you, and thank you for taking on an indefinite time frame. And hopefully it's definite and we have a bridge. So thank you. And to the staff, having sat on this and worked on both sides of this bridge now for a very long time, thank you for your leadership, but thank you to Greg for coming on. I cannot express in public how your leadership has crafted this to be the best project that it could be and still move forward. You have brought a pragmatism and you brought your listening hat. And that was much appreciated because we know in the past that was not necessarily the case. And so thank you for showing the way and being a lighthouse in this whole thing.
Very welcome.
And to our staff, this has also been a very, it's been a good process. I know that we've come up with a little bit of tension every once in a while, but I think healthy tension is good to get to a better product. And that we have the best of intentions for getting what this region needs for our long-term vision met. And I think that you have committed to that, and I am so appreciative. And I think the best part of all of this for me is just the teamwork between the two sides of this river has never been so strong, and that we both recognize the visions on each side of the bridge that are different, but yet very similar. And I think that's brought us together in a way that we might not have in the past. So thank you to all of you for that working relationship. With that, I look forward to having this come back before the council. And if there are any other questions, we know how to access you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to move on to our agenda on the supportive housing services reform. As I mentioned briefly last week, we have the rest of today's work session set aside for this. And I do want to try and get you out of here at 1. So we have 50 minutes. So we're going to try and get through this and give it the attention that it needs, but also make sure that we keep to a timeline. So I'd like to review for council and the public where we are in this process, and then I'll turn it over to our interim housing director, Liam Frost, to present some proposed oversight reforms. We will have opportunities for focused discussions throughout. Liam, do you want to come on up? As we start this conversation, I think the first thing that we need to tackle and just get head nods and any comments on is that while we've done an incredible job bringing together people to focus on how we keep this funding delivering life-saving programs across the region. We've all had our briefing on the polling. And it's become clear to me, if not to you, that there's really not a path this year to an extension of this measure, and that the gap in public trust is too wide. And we're going to have to work very hard over the coming years to narrow that gap and regain the trust of the public. And so I'm looking today for head nods on if folks agree, or if you don't, this would be the time to say, yeah, you see a path. I think that's the first thing we have to get out of the way. Counselors, any thoughts, questions, comments? Counselor Gonzalez?
Here.
Hmm?
No argument from me.
In terms of the question
Yeah,
Can you
of
repeat the question?
going to the ballot,
about, so can we-
about going to the ballot this year for an extension of SHS.
I don't think I understand.
We need to make sure that staff understand where the council's direction is.
Okay.
Whether we're going to the ballot or not. And my recommendation is that I don't see a path.
I agree with your assessment. I just wanted to make sure that I really understood the framing of the question. It is very unfortunate that we're in a deficit with voters, given the incredible work and the lives that are being impacted by this funding. And I think the voters are asking us a lot of important questions around do more with what you have and work better together. And so I think that is our responsibility. So anyway, I know we're gonna have a presentation here to talk more.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, I'll just say, I'm generally supportive and I'm not particularly surprised. There's always a lag between perception and progress. We've made a lot of progress, but the perception of that has not percolated as widely. And the my only concern I have is, shall we say, for the fate of larger issues going forward in the next 2 years. But we can't change those.
So Councilor Lewis.
Sure, I will hop in and say that the world is a pretty dismal place right now. And there are so many things that are happening outside of our control. What we do to take care of our neighbors is within our control. That said, there's not a path forward for November of 2025 as a ballot strategy. And as a reminder, we need the ballot in particular to renew the tax beyond its current sunset. And if we want to start building deeply affordable housing that actually helps house people. So we need a ballot at some point, but November 2025 is not it.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand. Councilor Nolan. Nope, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam President. As I said, I don't dispute your conclusion about the public's reception. I think we make a serious mistake, though, if we frame this as the public not understanding. They understand what they voted for, and I think part of the problem has been that we didn't understand what the voters approved in 2020. We need a very substantial material change in that, in our understanding of what does help keep our neighbors in safe and dignified housing. And we need to put a tremendous amount of energy into building on the better rapport we have developed in the last several months, 9 months, with our county partners to make sure that we're focusing on what we can do and delivering results that are visible to the public, but also sustainable for the individuals who live in the housing that we build and who benefit from the services that we fund. We haven't done that. And if we can't look in the mirror and acknowledge that we've missed some important things, you can't fix something that you don't acknowledge. And I am hopeful that the work that has been done in the last several months is just a platform to move forward, to acknowledge our shortcomings, the shortcomings of the 3-county autonomy, but also being part of a regional solution. We need to gesture to the left field fence and then hit the home run. And give the voters, give the public a very real, tangible, hard to do result, accomplishment, and then figure out how to deliver it. Government is a part of that. Governance is a part of that, but that's not what the public's paying attention to.
Thank you. Councilor Wong?
Yeah, I think I agree with, everyone's, political assessment. And I really want to just have the conversation about, what's next. And
That's what we're doing.
yes,
Check.
in my mind, I think there's kind of like 3 kind of areas of work that we need to be working on. The first is continuing the process of reform that we've started on the path of, and then we have an ordinance coming up. I think the president's work group was a great move to begin to see what a functional unified system could look like. So I don't think we need to go to voters for that. I think that's just something that we need to do to begin to rebuild that trust that local government can execute and be excellent at implementation. So continuing that conversation. I think simultaneously we also want to be planning for the future, and really having thoughtful community conversations, with jurisdictional partners and providers around, what the future could be. And I really see kind of us doubling down our efforts, or we wind it down. And I think it's appropriate now to both dream big, but also ask for a wind down plan simultaneously. Like, we can't continue on this and not have a renewal in a couple of years. That'd be irresponsible to, the folks we're hoping to serve that are, in programming and being, in-housed right now. So what does that look like if this all goes away? And what is, a new system where we can all get behind and have that functional, long-term system in place. So I think there's kind of a divergent planning process. And then finally, I think we just need to be, excellent communicators. And I think that's been part of a missing element is, we're not communicating accurately. I think the polling shows people don't think, a significant portion don't think that measure is working as intended. And that's because we didn't communicate how it was supposed to work from a front end and benchmark to that. So we need to be able to communicate what we're doing now in our reform and planning process, and also communicate how, the program is serving community members and what we're going to do to make it more effective and efficient. So I know it's a lot of work. That's like three kind of big buckets, but I think that's where we're at. And I'm hopeful that if we can execute on those, that we'll have a viable path forward in the next couple years. But I do think we need some sort of reset and planning process. And yeah, I think the polling shows that.
Thank you. Counselor Simpson?
Thank you, Madam President. I won't belabor the issue, but I'm also supportive of that direction. But I think there's a lot here. And to Councilor Lewis's point, I don't think the windshield test will ever pass most voters because of things that are beyond our control. That said, I do want to thank all of our partners that spent a lot of Monday evenings here in this chamber, and President Peterson, as well as Interim Director Frost and staff, countless hours, tremendous amounts of energy. However, it's not lost. We can still hold on to that, and we can have reform at a later time. So thank you.
Thanks. I loved your list, Counselor Wong. And obviously what's on the agenda today is the first step in that. I don't think this is a time to take our foot off the accelerator at all. We need to show a significant amount of change, not just in process and governance, but on the ground in the next 2 years. So if you work back from January 2028, I would love this council, because many of you will be continuing on. Some of us won't. To have firmly in mind, what do you want to accomplish by January 2028? And then that's where we work back with our staff and our partners. There is a 4-month, we have 4 months to basically, I believe, get up and running the Policy Advisory Committee, because they have a lot of initial work to do. And I have a bit of a time frame that I've proposed to staff in that 4-month period that takes on these elements in a distinct way because they need to build on each other. And we also need to give ownership of decision-making to the new PAC. So there's only so much that we can do at this point in terms of moving forward all of those items at the same time. But between now and September, we have a lot of work to do. And that's a we, unfortunately. You might be getting some text messages, some calls from Liam saying, in order to get ready for September, I need to talk to you in August, about some things. So I just want to prepare you for some of that. And then the question is, once we're up and running, what needs to be on that work plan agenda, both for the PAC and for us, to start walking through these changes and start reforming what we can without going to the ballot? Because the expectations of what this measure was when it was passed, how it was sold, and the expectations internally to the counties and how they thought this system would run is not going to be the case moving forward. And that's going to be challenging to the status quo, and it's going to be difficult. But the only way that we can get through this is by keeping to an agenda, keeping our ears open to how this will make impacts throughout the system as we change. Be ready to be flexible, but keep that deadline in your head, because that's what you're going to need in order to actually be successful past 2028. So that's my plea to you as somebody who will not be here, is to hold firm as you can to getting there, which means putting in the time and energy as a council. So as we move through this, thank you for that clarity. I am in agreement with everything everybody said. We do need to build on the momentum, and today is talking about the first part of that, which is making the reforms that are needed if we're going to have a chance to convince the voters in the future. Of those reforms, the priority for now versus what we can do in a few months is to get this governance model up and running. So we have to define it, adopt it, and start working on what it is and the processes and the first set of agendas for this Policy Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee and an independent review panel that we'll talk about. So Liam's going to walk us through where the proposal for oversight now stands. It is similar to what you heard in January, but there are now new elements and timelines to consider based on the president's work group input and what we have just made a decision of not to go to the ballot with an agreement. I may interrupt Liam a little bit during his presentation to further define some of the elements. And then we can talk about timelines for next steps after that. And I will hand out at the end something for you to chew on for July, even in September, which is the vision, mission, KPIs that the president's work group created. So it's a very short handout. No, I don't want to give it to you yet. You'll look at it, you won't pay attention. So at the end, I will pass that out. And it's really just to give you the opportunity to spend some real time thinking about it over the next couple of months about what you see as missing, and then do even your own research and talking with staff to see how we can incorporate that. One of the elements that's not in here that I've already found is that we didn't deal with at the president's work group level is we don't have any KPIs for contract changes to get to a regional system viewpoint. So we're going to have to think about that. All right, I will turn it over to Liam. Thank you for that good conversation. Appreciate this council so much. All right, Liam.
So if we can get that slide deck up and running, and while we do, I'll just say my name is Liam Frost. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the interim director of the housing department here at Metro. And I just want to affirm the timing of this discussion. It's been 5 years since voters across the region approved the SHS measure, and we're almost halfway through the implementation of the lifetime of the initiative itself. So in many ways, the very public assessment that we've sponsored from Metro over the last year and a half is extremely well timed. New programs and services have been rolled out, systems built up where there were none, and per county reporting our original work plan goals either have been achieved or about to be achieved. And thousands of people who spent too much time living without a home of their own no longer have to endure homelessness. And while and I'm going to say we a lot in this presentation. When I say we, I don't just mean Metro, I mean Metro and the county, service providers, the system. I want to be very clear about that. And while we've been collectively hard at work building out this new homeless services system of care, we've both learned many lessons along the way. And also the landscape has changed. For example, the forces that cause homelessness still continue to evict people from their homes. The federal government is actively revising requirements for housing, and the state budget released last week includes significant cuts that prevent homelessness. We have our work cut out for us. But again, in some ways, Councillor Simpson, we have a head start because we've been talking to our partners for a year and a half. We've been revising and assessing what's worked and where we can make improvements, and where through public surveys, where we're not hitting the mark, frankly. If we can get to slide 3, that would be great. And I just want to make a note from my point of view on the polling. Yeah, it's initially disappointing, but I want to say that I'm personally energized. We have a lot of work to do. I'm excited about the work ahead of us. And I think collectively, especially Metro and the counties, we know what needs to be done, and we're ready to roll up our sleeves. The slide before you just encapsulates the process that was launched by COO Madrigal early last year. We then went and did a deep dive with stakeholders and coalitions. We worked with you all along the way, providing updates. You took some action at council. And then most recently, as we know, Council President Peterson sponsored the Metro Council President Work Group. We've collected a heck of a lot of information all along the way, and a lot of it has been consistent. What you won't see in this slide is input from the SHS Oversight Committee, the Tri-County Planning Body, service providers, all again providing input that has bubbled up throughout this process, as well as our county partners in conversations that we've had. This process has opened that up. I heard in the last agenda item, Council President mentioned a healthy tension. Well, that's something that I really want to be present from here on in, and really eliminate or mitigate some of that unhealthy tension that we've experienced. Point is that we've collected a lot of information over the last year and a half to get us to where we're at this point in time. Next slide, please. So what you'll see before you here are key priority areas of SHS reform in buckets. And so we're going to focus on that first bucket today around the oversight structure. And then we'll be returning to have that discussion with you, as President Peterson mentioned earlier, around compliance, regionalization and prioritization, contract management, transparency and data. And these are areas, as I mentioned in the previous slide, have come up over and over again, right from March 2024 to just a couple of weeks ago. A lot of consistent input across the board. And these are change. You might look at this and think about, Councilor Nolan's not here, but we might look at this as bureaucratic changes or moving the chairs around a bit. But we've wanted to put a lens in all of this about how does it actually make a difference to providing the best level of services we can and squeezing every last dollar. And again, we is not just Metro, we're talking about our county partners. And a lot of these changes will need to be made in collaboration with our county partners and bringing them along. Next slide, please. And as you can tell, I'm going to try and get through these slides somewhat quickly so we can reserve some time for your discussion. So moving into the work group feedback specifically, this desire for role clarity is something that is near and dear to my heart. When we launched the SHS initiative back in 2020, 2021, Metro was seen as a pass-through agency. And, I'm looking at Shane Abner right now. Full disclosure, I was working for Multnomah County at the time. I think since then, I think the assumption that the 4 jurisdictions would be working in partnership to develop some of these rules and compliance and accountability structures was frankly a little bit naive at the time. I think we have to accept that Metro is a funder and be clear about the lane that we're in, and also communicate that directly and clearly to our partners who are also expecting some role clarity from Metro. And that's some of the discussions I've already initiated with my counterparts of the counties. There's a lot of work to do there, but I'm hopeful. Part of the desire that came up at the work group was for stronger mechanisms of accountability and compliance, the teeth to make the system improvements where possible, not in real time, but more responsive per se than we have been over the first 5 years of building it out. Also that we use new goals and key performance indicators to measure success and determine if we're meeting those goals. We need those indicators to focus on success for the person and people struggling with homelessness so that they're able to achieve stability and independence in the long term. We also heard continued desire for independent evaluation that needed to ensure that all parts of the system are held to a standard of continuous improvement, even when it requires changing how we approach the work. And throughout the process, we heard that data collection and reporting has lacked a regionalized and consistent approach, and what we do have needs to be cleaner. And so I want to be clear that we do receive information from the counties, we do receive reporting, and with the new data sharing agreement, we are going to have the ability to have a deeper dive into that data and validate it. But what we heard from the work group was a consistency issue from county to county, and then when it comes up to Metro, that we're able to reflect that there is a unified system approach to data reporting. The next 2 bullets here are related. Work group members, along with others, have said that they want to ensure that governance reforms don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Folks wanted to carry forward progress that has been made in the current system, including at the Tri-County Planning Body Table and the SHS Oversight Committee in local implementation. And just to share an example with you, both those committees have been very consistent in some of the priority areas. For example, behavioral health and its intersectionality with homelessness. A regional coordinated communications plan that Israel and the communications team are really well on the way to doing. And then also consistently supporting our workforce through the service providers, through a living wage, technical assistance, training, so that we can retain that workforce and they can deliver a standard of quality care. We also heard that work group members want this to be incorporated into a culture of learning and iteration that recognizes there will always be a change in the forces that cause homelessness and housing needs, and the conditions impacting our success. To me, that really speaks to the scale and scope of the nature of homelessness and our ability as a system to be more responsive. So finally, we heard loud and clear that we need to make sure our processes stay efficient in assessing options, investing in needs, evaluating and communicating results, and adapting as we go. It's worth pointing out here that we've never had a system of homeless services in the way that we've had other infrastructure systems, transportation, law enforcement, and so on. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here we're going to get into the meat of it and what President Peterson is proposing. These are the key elements of reformed oversight. What we're trying to solve for here is really keeping our eye on the end outcome. So you might be following these blocks and the processes, but what we're looking to do is improve those outcomes for people permanently. And we believe through the feedback we've heard that these are going to help us get to that point. What you also may see resonate here is that it kind of mirrors or echoes processes you've seen in other parts of Metro. And so this is an effort to align some of these processes with regional transportation, land use planning, for example. And just so you can orient yourself to this slide too, the key flow here is from right to left. We went back and forth on this with Craig. But from right to left, we're incorporating knowledge and data outcomes, moving to that independent evaluation I just mentioned that connects recommendations to decision makers. And then careful weighting of policy options by a group of knowledgeable people who will be prepared to implement the technical advisory committee, which we will talk about later in the presentation. And then finally, on the far left there, not politically, but on the slide, decision-making and accountability at the regional level. So that's Metro Council and the Policy Advisory Committee, which we'll also be discussing in further detail. But I'm going to pause here for the discussion led by President Peterson.
So obviously, this isn't going to operate like JPACT, but it would be similar. And what we had proposed last time in January is that there would be a concurrence mechanism between Metro Council and the Policy Advisory Committee. In other words, both bodies will have access to the same information at the same time, but the Policy Advisory Committee would be making recommendations to Metro Council, and we would need to be in concurrence or send it back. Obviously, that's never happened to JPACT because staff work both sides to make sure that that never happens. So just kudos to staff in this arena, and I appreciate all of the work that goes into that. And the only thing that's really, really different is obviously JPACT, MPAC, RWAC do not have an independent review panel. But that was obviously one of the things we were solving for. There's a lot of calls for audits, but there's already auditors that do audits. So we very specifically said we would have an independent review panel, and we'll go into more conversation about that in a minute to see if it hits the mark for you. And we'll go into what the Technical Advisory Committee role is and the Policy Advisory Committee's role is and the makeup of that in the next slides. I think that's all I wanted to cover at this level, but I think the question is this hitting the mark for the reforms that we needed on governance? Because when you look at what was happening with TCPB and the oversight body, the things that they were discussing didn't have a place to land. There was no body of decision makers to actually implement what they were recommending. And so what we're trying to do is define the roles, who makes the decisions, how they make the decisions, what they're making decisions on, and who has the final say. So when we go through these, I really need to hear if we've missed something on what the Metro Council's role is. Right? We really need to hear, did we miss something about the Policy Advisory Committee's role that we need to specify? Not just the makeup, but the actual role, and then the independent review panel as well. So those are the types of things that we need input on now in order to have this come back before us in July so that we can adopt it and we can start working on setting up the Policy Advisory Committee for September, October. So just you're keeping that in your head. Go ahead. Is this generally the structure that you had remembered, intended, and, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is the first time I've looked at it, but I have two immediate thoughts. First, it looks pretty good. The first comment would be the Technical Advisory Committee. There are probably going to be in the technical advisory committee, subject matter subcommittees that are going to report on various different aspects that are going to have to work their way through that. So there's going to be a sort of a substructure there. And secondly, on the policy advisory committee, it strikes me that there may be two levels of kinds of decision making that's necessary. One is that on major policy and one is on implementation of major policies, technical informations, whether it's contract forms and things like that. And I guess I would ask how that second level, which is not overarching policy, but is sort of implementation policy, how that is going to be held. And is that intent all to come to the Metro Council, or will the policy advisory have some independent areas where they can make particular changes of their own?
So we're going to go into depth into each one of those next. We're going to pull it apart. I think I was looking for just the overall structure, if this is the right overall structure, and then we'll go down into those details. My quick answer to your question is compliance. The way we've structured it is that the Policy Advisory Committee would recommend to the Metro Council, who would have the power to actually implement the compliance structure if that was needed for, say, a corrective action. So we'll get back into that structure more in terms of the roles, but is this generally what you expected?
Thank you.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. What part of this structure facilitates the collective governance to establish a deadline for functional zero in homelessness? And then what part makes it more likely or facilitates setting enforceable milestones so that we get there? Because that's what I'm looking for.
The way it's structured right now is no matter whether it's a policy or a compliance issue, it would, an implementation discussion, it would be at the technical advisory committee would propose to the policy advisory committee. The policy advisory committee would wrestle with it and then send it to Metro. Except for compliance, we would hold that power for that final decision.
Thank you for that, but I might not be expressing myself well. I'm looking for a governance structure that facilitates satisfying the need that we've identified, the counties have identified. We know that the point in time count is hides some of the need, so it is lower than the actual need. We've never talked about how we actually do what the voters want us to do, which is end the homeless crisis. And I'm looking for a governance structure that makes it more likely that we can do that. And I don't.
So we're gonna get into roles and responsibilities of each one of these next. And I guess what I would say is the regional vision framework that I'll hand out, that would be the first kickoff part of getting to what you're saying. What we don't have in the system right now, because we're just getting data in now and we don't have a clear through line with the counties, we don't know what the capacity of the program is at any one time. So we can't get to the question you're asking until we figure that out. And that's the basis of why we can't articulate to the public what we're actually achieving, what our goal was, and what we're actually achieving. We don't have that yet, right? So that's what this is supposed to do. Anyway.
So to answer your question then, it doesn't do that for me.
Yes.
I don't see where this moves us forward on setting real objective outcomes and using our collective efforts, wisdom, insights to to define how we get from where we are to where we need to be within the limits of the resources we have available.
So at the end of the conversation, if you have any insights, ideas, or afterwards on things that we could change that would better articulate your idea, that would be helpful to us. But at this point, we haven't given you the full story yet. So I'm not sure how to even approach that.
Just reacting to what
Yep.
I'm seeing and hearing.
Yep, I understand. Counselor Lewis.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate how this has been presented. I do think that this is very on brand for Metro. Obviously, we have arrows every which direction and we're using the right colors, so it's a Metro chart. But we're missing an arrow. One more arrow, please. I do think, I think in terms of at a program by program level, we have some of the experts in this country. So Portland is going to see a great amount of expertise just in who's already at our TAC. So as we bring in an independent review panel, which my understanding is more academic, more national folks, they're going to need to understand our local context.
Yeah.
So we need to actually let the TAC and the independent review panel talk. So
one more arrow.
One more arrow.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Thank you. Anybody else? Generally okay? Okay. Counselor Gonzalez?
Thanks, President Peterson. I think, I mean, there's been so much work that is condensed into a few slides. And as Counselor Simpson mentioned a while ago, you know, the conversations I know haven't always been in full unanimous chorus of consensus. And I think that the work group has also illuminated where there are potentially some deep disagreements around approach and around authority and around who stays in what lane. And so I think that is not reflected in this document as well. And is just in the back of my mind. I just want to acknowledge that you've been working really hard to address that and bring folks into alignment. What my question around this oversight structure and how we do that, I'm thinking about it in relationship with the IGAs, which we're locked into for 5 to 6 more years. And so there's this work that we're doing that, to Liam's point, we're not reorganizing the chairs, but like the fundamental infrastructure of the agreements is codified. And how does this oversight committee help that work evolve to meet the moment, right? So I think I'm also trying to connect with what Councilor Nolan said, because I think there's something really valid there, but we're also contractually obligated to each other in a specific arrangement for the 10-year program. So I'm curious to hear how you think that this work will maybe address that or not address that, work around the gray areas where we think there is immediate work to do. That's my first question.
The things that would change under this as we move forward is that we would have a regional vision framework that would have a vision, mission, KPIs. That's the first thing. The second, as proposed, there would actually be a regional plan. Right now, we don't have a regional plan. We have 3 distinct county plans with no goals and no way to know whether you're meeting the targets. So that's the first one. That would affect a contract, right, or an IGA. That would change that. Then in the IGA, the decisions that come out of the Policy Advisory Committee and Metro Council would have to be then incorporated into an IGA of what's expected of carry forward based on the decisions made on the Policy Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Those are just 2 that I can come up with right now.
Yeah. I think it's like, for me, it is an area that, I mean, we are not going to be able to figure out in this work session.
Right, but the third one, is contract, on the contracts, right? We've heard that there is pay inequity between the 3 counties and their contracts. They don't have outcome-based contracting because they don't have KPIs. So that would be another part of the IGA that they would have to then be in alignment with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are the kind of the day-to-day structures that will have to change.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, anyway, like I was saying, I think that's going to be a big question. And I mean, I think depending on what side of the conversation you're approaching this, like, you know, I feel like if the counties have said, we do have goals, we are working towards those goals. And then, you know, you just start to split the hairs around the data sharing agreements and the granularity of that, the connection to the outcomes that we expect. And so anyway, there's just so much work to do here. And I do think that this is like a microcosm of a lot of the things that we need to work on as a region, as a state, in terms of collaboration and alignment, frankly. Second question around, and I had it open in this other slide. For the actual composition of the policy advisory committee.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oops.
We're still on the first slide of just the structure. So if you want to.
Yeah, I went forward to the next one. Okay, great.
Okay. Any other comments on the structure? Yeah, Counselor Lewis and then Counselor Nolan.
Yeah, I was content with my first set of comments, except now I'm thinking that we brought up the day in and day out practices that need to change, and how Metro Council in our upper left-hand corner box then interacts with the 3 county boards. That has to change. Because we don't have a joint session with the counties. We rely on shuttle diplomacy and whoever's willing to raise their hand to maybe come to some meetings. And that's not representative of the full bodies, either on our end or their end. So I think we got to figure out how to have joint meetings with each of the 3 counties, or somehow make things up in the upper left not get lost. Yes, I understand that the Policy Advisory Committee will have members who are elected. That's not the same as Metro and Multnomah County meeting and talking out our issues, or Metro and Clackamas County meeting and talking about our issues. It cannot be reliant on 1 or 2.
Like a MERC, almost kind of joint.
Like, I've seen joint work sessions work before. We've never tried it, but.
Yeah, an implementation portion of this that would be off to the side. That's just kind of the day-to-day grind between the staff and Metro, the electeds, I think is what you're asking for. And I totally hear that. We can figure that out. Counselor Nolan.
Thank you, Madam President. My line of inquiry actually follows Counselor Lewis's quite well. I'm interested, not having served on your work group, or I haven't attended the meetings as an observer. In the course of that discussion, did the county representatives commit to changing their perspective on this program from a, what am I going to do in my county, and frankly, what does my county get out of it, to a, how are we going to meet the collective social mandate to house 15,000 people who don't currently have housing?
My general response to that would be that commissioners that showed up were committed to change. The status quo wasn't going to stay the same. And that they recognized that there was a need to work together. And Sakan McIvy.
Sahan McKelvey.
Thank you. Sahan McKelvey. Couldn't think about how to spell his last name. What he said at the meeting was, what we have right now is 3 + 3 + 3 is equaling 6. And what we need for what we have right now is 3 counties that are not adding up to a full regional system. And what we need is 3 + 3 + 3 to equal 12. I thought that was the best quote of the entire thing. So I guess that would be my answer. Is I think there's a recognition. I think the president's work group was that first step in the water of building the muscle to work together as a region and not as 3 separate counties. The mayors want to be involved. all sorts of other stakeholders, healthcare, public safety, they all want to be involved in this. And I think there's a recognition that there is more to do together to get to the working relationships that we need to get the results. So that's my general.
Something that I observe is that everyone who sits at this table, these two tables, carries a title that starts with Metro. And the elected officials of the counties carry a title that starts with their county. So we are the ones responsible to the metro area. And I have observed and am grateful that that is by and large the way we approach our work here. Not as a criticism, but just as an observation. That's not the way the counties approach their work. And we need something that gives them reasons to think about a regional perspective.
So agreed, and we have talked about funding mechanisms that could do that. We've talked about policy that can do that. There's a lot more depth in that question than I think we can get to today, seeing that it's 5-1, and we still need to get through all of this. Yeah, but I think that's a really good observation. What I will say again is that there were commissioners in the room that acknowledged that we needed a regional system and were willing to propose things that would move us in the direction of a regional system. I don't think it's as quick as maybe you would want it, but is a step in the right direction, and I'm taking it as a sign of optimism. Okay, Liam, why don't we roll through all of the structures and then have a closing conversation?
Thank you. So I'm going to present on 4 slides next, and there's going to be a slide on the independent review panel, a slide on the technical advisory committee, and a slide on the policy advisory committee, finished with Metro Council. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to run through this succinctly as I can so that we can get to discussion around these bodies and the membership. So this is one of the newest parts of President Peterson's proposals, as we just talked about. It's an idea that emerged out of the work group process, but something like this has popped up all the way through the last year and a half, independence being a key element of it. We hear clearly from the work group and other stakeholders that there needs to be a role for more independent assessment, including fresh thinking from outside the region. Metro Council President Peterson presented the concept of an independent review panel on June 16th. There she described it as a, quote, small, indisputably knowledgeable group of individuals who can provide frequent and helpful evaluations of our system's effectiveness and efficiency at meeting the needs on the ground, end quote. The independent review panel would begin by reviewing existing and future system audits and evaluations, as well as SHS program and financial reporting provided by Housing Department staff and FRS staff. They would integrate broader context and analysis from beyond the region and state. I think where this can be particularly helpful programmatically is that a lot of these areas that we are moving towards, we're leading in terms of best practices for PSH, permanent supportive housing, for example. So having that connectivity across the nation would be helpful for the system. And then as they would make these recommendations, they bring them to the Policy Advisory Committee and to Metro Council for discussion about how to incorporate into regional plans, policies, and future cycles of evaluation. As the work program, review panel would issue a report that recommends specific opportunities and improvements to meet priority needs and address areas of challenge. When necessary, they could also recommend corrective actions to Metro Council as part of this proposal. Next slide, please. Oh, this is the fun stuff. Technical Advisory Committee. This is one area where at Council President's direction, we are presenting some additional level of detail for Council consideration that we haven't included in the past. I think it's worth noting we've heard of the term Technical Advisory Committee in many instances in our careers. And I just want to point out that this Technical Advisory Committee is somewhat unique. It's going to be hard work. It will require people at a senior executive level position from organizations and agencies, not only to provide that technical assistance, but are able to go back to their agencies and implement. And so it kind of speaks to Councilor Nolan's question in the last piece. This is one of the areas where folks should feel a compulsion to work together and align their services and programming. That's why we are including leaders in each of these agencies. The system cannot function in a healthy way, let alone adapt to changing needs without the knowledge and experience of those leading the work. That's true of Metro's other advisory processes as well. While elected officials can place homelessness among other regional and local priorities, their views typically at a higher level than what's happening on the ground. That's why this TAC is so significant. They'll have the experience and knowledge to receive and analyze input from people with lived experience, provider partners, jurisdictions, Metro staff, and independent evaluators on what's needed and what's working to address those needs. And they'll also bring forward the very important work in the first few years of the program by the dedicated members of the Tri-County Planning Body. I'm a little biased towards this work. I've been working in it for a long time with Councillor Lewis and Valerio McWilliams, who's led that work with me over the last couple of years. And there's been spits and starts and false starts here and there. But there's been some amazing progress that has come out of there, including some of the case conferencing work I've been speaking to each of you about recently with the behavioral health agencies, as well as technical assistance and so on. And we don't want to lose that. The Tri-County Planning Body aligned on 6 goals that were coming up at the Oversight Committee too, that were coming up at the service provider level. And so we don't want to kind of start anew. We want to pass the baton. And so there's some work to do there in transition, but the TAC will carry that work on in the future. They'll also recommend areas for evaluation, review local implementation partners' draft plans, and annual work plans for alignment with best practices and regional plans, policies, and provide feedback before they go to the Policy Advisory Committee or Metro staff for approval. This is part of the culture of learning and iteration I mentioned earlier that has worked well for Metro and transportation and land use advisory processes. So let's talk about the members. These are proposed numbers for the members. We need a little more time to socialize this with partners, and we are definitely interested in your feedback here. Worth noting that the state agencies mentioned are the Oregon Department of Human Services, Housing and Community Services, Health Authority, and the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Important to note that this group will also need to form subcommittees and create input channels to inform its consideration and recommendations. These include providers, TCPB members, TCPB standing for Tri-County Planning Body, and people with lived experience of homelessness. Metro staff will need to support this committee's work and this engagement, and we stand ready to start the planning for that. Next slide, please. All right. The idea of a single oversight committee has long been part of these reforms for some time and was described in detail in the ordinances council discussed in January, as well as the resolution you passed last October. And I know that some of you have considered this in great detail since January. You should be familiar with the main duties of the committee, but it's important to note that they'll be instrumental in carrying forward the work and recommendations of the SHS Oversight Committee and the Tri-County Planning Body. We still have some work to do to define the transition, and Yesenia Delgado, the SHS Division Director, myself, and others in the Housing Department stand ready to do that work, along with some of our senior leadership here. With perspectives from Metro counties, cities, state partners, providers, and community representatives, the Policy Advisory Committee brings together knowledge and direct responsiveness to community priorities and needs. That's why the regional framework and subsequent action plans would be finalized and adopted by the PAC first before Metro Council action. The PAC also would consider and apply recommendations that come from independent evaluation, as well as the deeper topical knowledge of that technical advisory committee we just discussed. The local implementation plans would also be reviewed and approved by the Policy Advisory Committee for alignment with regional plans and policies, including making changes as those policies change. The Policy Advisory Committee must be in a key role of reviewing and providing feedback on draft annual work plans, annual reports, monitoring and compliance, and recommending corrective actions to the Metro Council when needed. If some of this sounds familiar, it's because it is familiar. These are many of the duties that our committees currently carry, but to President Peterson's point earlier, there's a greater role for this committee, especially as it relates to you all as Metro Council. Finally, the Policy Advisory Committee will issue annual reports to the public and to Metro Council. This will all be, of course, supported by Metro staff, particularly staff in our housing department. Some updated thinking in President Peterson's proposal here includes increasing the number of county commissioners by 3 and ensuring that the directors of the 4 agencies are represented in a non-voting capacity. All right, next slide, please. This is the last slide I believe that I'm presenting today, and it's about you all. Metro Council is ultimately responsible and held responsible by voters for this measure and needs to have the final say on many of the key aspects. That's why Metro Council needs to be able to appoint committee members that are not appointed by the counties or the cities and approve regional priorities and plans, provide guidance on investment and system priorities, and be ready to act on compliance when it is needed. But we know council can't act alone. Many of these approvals will be done in concurrence with the Policy Advisory Committee of regional and local government leaders and community system stakeholders. Metro councillors will sit at the table, and just like our other regional policy advisory committees, that's a working relationship with partners that I know you all take very seriously. If council disagrees on regional frameworks and plans, council won't overrule the Policy Advisory Committee, but send decisions back for reconsideration, which you're all very familiar with. Additionally, to avoid bottlenecks and keep implementation moving, Metro Council will need to specify Metro COO and staff role by adopting administrative rules around monitoring, compliance, and annual work planning. I'm going to hand it back to President Peterson. You no longer have to listen to me. I will be sticking around for questions, though, should you have any for me in particular.
Thank you. So the 2 questions that we have,
You should go to the next slide if you can there, Georgia.
are these the right types of knowledge and accountabilities represented at the tables? And are these the right duties for each of these bodies? And you don't necessarily have to have the answer right now. You can spend a little time, but we do need to get a draft ordinance ready to go in the next week or 2. So, observations. Councilor Lewis, Wong, Rosenthal.
Sure, thanks. I want to start, and it's going to sound nitpicky, but I think it's pretty fundamental. Liam, I think you used the word compliance at least 3 times. Compliance connotes the idea that you're working in a regulated environment or in an environment where there's clear what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And in particular, in human services work, it's a case-by-case scenario. And in how our measure was funded, we had a long list that was not exclusive of services that could be provided. So compliance sounds good. It's what makes us feel good, and maybe we can sleep better at night. We're not set up for it. So if we're going to continue to say we're going to have this structure that supports compliance, how do we get there?
Great question. As I mentioned in the latter part of the presentation, I said that some of this sounds familiar. It echoes some of the previous work that we've been setting up in Yesenia's division. I'll say the elements are there, and Yesenia is going to just give you a brief overview what those elements are. I think the structures that we have in place right now haven't been sufficient to make sure that we collectively are following what we need to follow in terms of compliance. I understand what you're saying around human services. It's traditionally difficult around compliance, and that's why I've invited Yesenia to join me at the table.
Yeah, good afternoon. For the record, I'm Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the SHS Division Director. To your point, Councilor Lewis, with human services, the sector, it is very gray, very nuanced. However, there are things out there like best practices, definitions and standards that have been set, a lot of these on a national level. And those have been the things that have been memorialized in things like our work plan, like counties should be following those sorts of things. Although Metro Council and Metro staff haven't gone through the process of adopting what we call here like administrative rules, which would then provide a lot more of the the best practices that we know to be out in the field and adopting to that. For example, right now we are in the middle of monitoring the counties, and the practice and the oversight administrative function of monitoring looks at how well are the counties following the rules and practices and standards that we do have in place. So although we haven't gone through that process of establishing all the different rules, regulations, standards, and I think that would be part of the reform package that we're discussing today, there is some stuff in our work plan and our IGAs and other policies that we've set forth that we have been using to monitor. And that's one of the functions. Other oversight administrative functions that we are conducting are things like reviewing reports, the quarterly and the annually reports, and measuring them up against the compliance metrics that we do have set forth in the work plan and IGAs and other governance documents. And then other oversight administrative functions that we're doing are things like the data sharing agreement, evaluation, like seeing how effective are the programs that we're funding in solving people's homelessness. But I think, to go back to your question, all of that kind of gets more nuanced, a bit more challenging if we don't have those really clear standards, definitions, set in place through what we are calling administrative rules, which would be kind of like the next iteration of how to further advance compliance to really get clear around, like, when we go out and monitor or when we go out and evaluate, these are the things that we're evaluating or monitoring against.
Okay, yeah, I think in terms of the right duties, finding that clarity, and you're saying it's an administrative level, I think it's a combination of administrative and political.
Yeah.
Because there are some places where it is one county versus another, drastic philosophical differences on how they spend their dollars or how they do their budgeting, which feels very administrative, but then it trickles all the way up and down through the program. So yeah, that helps resolve that issue for me. And in terms of the types of knowledge at the tables, I think the right types are there. I worry about the balance, particularly if you're gonna have 20 some people, 22, I think if I did my math right, with only 5 potentially being on the ground service delivery. In particular, looking at those 3 health positions, I would hope that we have actual practitioners, and I don't need another, kind of policy person at the table. I need to have that balance, be more people who are practitioners. So I'm okay with the fields represented if we do a balance, which I know we do for so many things in terms of regional representation, demographics, lived experience. Also just like, where is your place in the system? And fewer people with desks, more people in the field.
So one of the things on the TAC is a subcommittee just for providers.
That's not good enough for me.
Okay, so what would you change within the technical advisory committee?
I wouldn't change the numbers in the boxes, but I would change the direction that when this body gets seated, we do our head counts of how many women and men, how many people from each of the 3 counties, right? You know how we do that? I would also have who interacts at least 3 days a week with somebody in crisis.
Can we have a quick conversation about that in terms of conflict of interest? Because we've been audited on that very issue, and I don't know how to get around that, and we can talk about it offline. But the staff know that it's like top of mind for me, is that I do not want conflicts of interest on these boards, perceptive as well as real, right? And I don't know how to account for that if we have them as part of the decision-making process. If they're part of adding to a decision-making process, they're informing, that I can get around. But if they're actually sitting and voting, then we've got a different problem. So I don't know how to get around that.
I think every person in this region has a real or perceived conflict of interest. Either paying the tax or they're not. Everybody's either homeless or they're not. I understand where it gets very real. If somebody's voting on a contract they will receive, but we're all in this together. So yeah, let's take this offline.
Yeah, maybe it's a limitation of the number of people who actually receive money. Yeah, this is a hard one. We'll have to think through it. But it's important that we don't set up a system that then creates distrust. Yeah, Counselor Wong.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. And I wanted to hold until I saw the slides on the structure. And I don't think I have specific, concerns or challenges about the structure. I think this is well thought out. I really do appreciate that comment around the math where we need 3 + 3 equals 2 + 3 + 3 equals 12.
For 12.
And I don't think the structure is what holds us back, or this new proposed structure from getting that. I think it's just really how decision-making and power is distributed. I think first, just maybe an ask would be to have in the future a slide about how this new structure is an evolution from the previous structure. Because I think it's hard for me to be like, well, this committee did this, in the before times, and now this new committee will do this in this new framework. And like, I think us and the public, we would really just like to see like, how are we incorporating feedback and showing kind of that evolution of governance. So just a simple slide of like, what's going to be different with a policy advisory committee versus, the Tri-County Planning Committee. So.
And for instance, the mayors were not included in any of it.
Yes.
Until this structure.
I know there's a lot of differences. I just would like to see the evolution of the differences so I can comprehend like the changes that we are making. And I think just, the crux of the matter for me really is no matter where it lies, we just need to have a place for more centralized resource conversation in distribution. And I don't know where that lies, but we can't have that sum better of our parts unless we have a conversation around how do we distribute a limited resource in a way that's most impactful and will get us the most return on investment for, the public's investment. And I don't see how that happens. And it's not necessarily the structure's fault. I think it's just like where authority lies. And
one of the things that we've talked about, to your earlier point about the wind down plans versus go forward plans, is that the policy advisory committee is going to have to do some financial scenarios and some prioritization. That is not a structure problem necessarily. That's a workload.
Right.
Do we get the right topics on the agenda? And I think that's probably the next part of conversation is what is that list, which I've started and it's long, of things that need to be on the work plan for this group. So I 100% agree, but it's like that's a piece of the work, not the structure itself.
Yeah. And I think if we're gonna have one system, we just need one decision-making group. And we just have to have that conversation around like, here's where the need is, here's what's being impactful. Like the way that we're just distributing resources now and figuring it out later is the root cause, I think, of what we're hoping to address. So I don't know if that's like modifications to IGAs or whatever, but I think that's where I really want, the conversation to focus is like, how do we make that decision and where, because we're all going to be held accountable to that. But it's not fair that we're being held accountable to, program delivery and work plans that we really have no influence over. So if we continue in the same system, it shouldn't be on us because we have no influence or control. So like accountability needs to come with authority at some point.
I mean, one suggestion is that we put the IGA negotiation conversations into the separate whether they're monthly or bi-monthly or quarterly meetings with the counties. And we work through those in a more public way than we did in the past, because it was not public, it was not transparent. And I think that's part of the work going forward, is to make all of this much more public.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the, like, we were, before many of our times, we're very hasty in creating this system, and I think we're playing catch up now for how kind of the governance model was set up. So I don't want us to rush, because I think the haste mix really was a real challenge before. But yeah, like how scarce resources, are most impactfully, attributed. I need to see that somewhere. Because I think that, that's the heart of the issue. Thanks.
So putting that into the roles of the Policy Advisory Committee and the Metro Council, I mean, the TAC, everybody, how are resources being best used, which is part of the KPI conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just maybe one follow-up is, what is the evolution between, the hastily created system and a durable system, and then where does the buck stop? Because I think that's where the public wants to know, like, the buck stops here, decisions are made here. If this doesn't work out, these are the people that are accountable.
And the continuous learning is part of this, right? I don't know how many conversations I was a part of at TPAC and JPAC over my lifetime about changing how federal money is distributed and the criteria. And Ted left the room, but he's been there the entire time too, right? So I think however we move forward, we have to build in that constant learning and reevaluation. If we're not achieving the goals, then what does it come down to in terms of prioritization of the money, and what are the criteria? Are we heading in the right direction? So that's what I hear.
Councillor, if I may jump in just to respond very quickly. I think you mentioned the phrase haste makes waste, right? I think it's worth recognizing that the first 5 years, or at least the first 3 to 5 years of the SHS implementation, the counties were very, very narrowly focused on building up their own systems, and we're under capacity. I just want to give a shout out to my county partners. I feel like they understand what's at stake. But more than that, they understand that there is a larger system that is being created here. And so I want to answer your question by where you asked, where did the buck stop? I hate to say it, but it's going to stop with all of us. And we're all going to have to assume that responsibility if we want to see this thing extended. I think if there's one consistent thing throughout this entire process from everybody we spoke to, was the need for this money, and to spend it wisely, to spend it effectively and efficiently, but that this money is actually needed. And so I think with the polling and with what's at stake, and also with the capacity that each of the counties now has, I'm somewhat sanguine about being able to use our collective wisdom together to answer some of those questions about the best use of our dollars. And also, I don't want to use the centralization word, but where does that authority come to Metro Council? Because that's the part that I've observed, the frustration that you all have expressed about we've not been able to weigh in, we've not been able to change things. With this proposed structure, I see an element of that, more than an element of that, where you will get to weigh in and provide that direction.
Thank you. And if I may, I think you're right that the buck stops with all of us, right? But like, I do think we need more specific points of authority and accountability, because I think what you see right now is, the buck stops with all of us. And, instead of creating a collaborative, forward-thinking culture and environment, I see and I feel that we're all blaming each other for not doing a good job. So, how do we instill that culture of shared accountability that takes the brunt off of like, oh, it's your, it's like we hear this in the press, the president's work group, it's like, you're not doing a good job. You're not, and like that mentality needs to stop because we are all in this together, but we need the structure to get us to that place.
And I'm sorry to jump in and take up so much space, but this is a subject that I feel really
Sure.
passionately about. And it comes back to that healthy tension versus unhealthy tension earlier. And we can only hold ourselves accountable if we know what our roles are and we're clearly defining those roles and we see each other playing those roles. Otherwise, we do get to a place where you did something wrong, you messed up, instead of saying, hey, you didn't hit the mark. What are we going to do different next time? And I think that role clarity piece is critical.
Yeah. Spot on. Can we move on? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input. Counselor Rosenthal and then Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's an interesting discussion. One of the points that I've always thought is that we know we're not going to get it perfectly the first time, probably. I mean, it's very unlikely. And so some mechanism for change, and the policy committee is going to be heavily involved in doing that. Probably also the experts that come at one of those other boxes are going to be heavily involved in saying, this is not working right, you need to change. And then ultimately the Metro Council will have to make a decision as to accepting some recommendations in that regard. My questions are a little bit more specific though. You, in two of the slides, you had healthcare brought out separately, and I'm a little perplexed as to why that is. To me, healthcare is about the same, maybe a little more important than, say, job training or legal counseling in many regards, but you broke healthcare out separately. And I just was just wondering why that was done.
We serve two populations through SHS, right? Population B, Population A. We refer to those folks in those kind of artificial cold terms, but what that means, 75% of those folks are experiencing chronic homelessness. Every single one of those people experiences a disability, a health need. Every single one of those folks who's defined by chronic homelessness has a disability.
Could you, I can't have trouble.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor. I'll get right into the microphone here for you. Every single person who is counted as Population A, otherwise known as chronic homeless, or experiencing chronic homelessness, has a disability and therefore has a health need, at least one. And so the longer that you're experiencing homelessness, it's empirically proven that your disabilities are either exacerbated or you'll actually accumulate more disabilities.
So including in your health concept, you include disability and also substance abuse issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't, and mental health issues as well. All right. I was unclear how broad that was constituted. I guess that was one of my concerns.
And our staff are working diligently right now to bring the healthcare community into this conversation, not just for coordination, but for the financial part of it, so that we're out, right? So we're leveraging as much as we can with other financing to make sure that hospitals are not, and they're not doing critical care, but they're actually doing proactive care. That's the way I would put it in my layman's terms.
With that broad perspective, I understand why you did it, but I was just wondering if you were limiting it to, other. I was worried it was a little limited. And then I'll just make one other comment, and that is on the. I think it's a double comment. First of all, I think we've already sort of realized that the Policy Advisory Committee is going to have different levels of decision making that they're going to have to do, and so there's a structure that's going to have to allow for that. And I personally have not understood the reason for having such strong Metro involvement in the Policy Advisory Committee. Since everything comes back to the Metro Council in the past, I would prefer personally to see more representation from the cities or other elected officials.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks, President Peterson. So this is the last work session before I probably am in paternity leave. And this is a really important topic that I know staff is going to be carrying for a few weeks, because you have an ambitious timeline, a reasonable timeline, to get, a new advisory structure up and started. And so I want to really leave my thoughts here with reflection and interpretation to help the conversation. Just kind of color the guidance for the council and for you, President Peterson. So kind of building off something that Councilor Rosenthal just said, but unfortunately, I'm on the other side of that statement. And I feel in general, when I look at the PAC, I am concerned, one, about how many people it is. It's very big. And also I am concerned about the structure, feeling like there is not enough, the weight for regional perspective versus cities and counties, I feel like is something that really concerns me. And in the last 3 years, we've seen a behavior, and hopefully that doesn't continue, where, there's like a block mentality, where, just to oppose Metro doing work, there's a block mentality. And so when I see 6 + 6 and then only 3 Metro and regional perspectives, that's a concern to me. And I just want to vocalize that. And I'm not sure if there's work that can be done there, because I know that this is something that emerged from the work group, but I just really want to be on record that I'm not sure if there's a way to reframe that, to shrink what I feel like is overrepresentation from the cities and the counties in relation to the regional program, but I just want to put that out there. And similarly, I have a question on the structure, which is in JPAC and NEPAC have a different approach to who chairs the committee. So on JPAC, it's always a Metro councilor that chairs. On NPAC, it's kind of revolving and assigned by the committee. I might have missed this, but what is the intention for this for HPAC?
JPAC.
It'll be a JPAC model, so it'll always be a Metro councilor that chairs it. Okay, thanks. So that in terms of structure, I just want to, that is my first piece of feedback, and I'm not sure if we want to go one by one or if I should just put it all on the table.
We are getting quite past one. Maybe it would be helpful to talk with staff.
Okay, yeah, for sure. And I'm happy to do that. And again, I'm one voice of many, and even, Councilor Rosenthal and I are canceling each other out in terms of perspectives, and I believe in the democratic process. And so that's fine. On provider expectations, I think I don't want to fall into the trap, and I think Councilor Lewis was talking about this, about like we're as a people, as a species, we're always like striving to get this like perfect balance of independent oversight and like perfect compliance and auditing and data standards. And like, I want to make sure that the mission is that we do the work and we don't like process ourselves to death. And I'm speaking from my experience as, I grew up in the provider network of social services. It's where my career began. And if you have worked for a provider and have the experience of being on the other side of partnering with a government, is like the amount of expectations of data, of reports, and like, what are you going to do with that data, right? Like, and I don't want us to collect data that we're not going to use and deploy. And so I think I just want to be mindful of that balance, because our providers should be doing the work and obviously reporting data that is meaningful, and we need to find a balance for that. But I just want to vocalize that like as we have those conversations. And at the same time, I think with the technical advisory committee and how that feeds into that, we've had providers that have been doing work in building the system for 3 to 4 years. And I am sure that if we empowered them and gave them resources to come up with recommendations on a more granular level, that they would like make recommendations that are beyond what our minds can comprehend at the regional policy level, in terms of fundamental system improvements of like, why does this go to here, and why does that take 10 days, right? Like, I as a Metro councilor do not have the capacity to do that. And so I do think that as we think about the duties and the opportunities for the PAC, is like, how do we generate resource opportunities for that at the provider level? And I think that's a really big opportunity. Lastly, on the PAC duty slide, I want to make sure that, and I think Councilor Huang was getting to this, but just a conversation around the regional investment. and either carve outs or some kind of ability to deploy on a less than 3-year basis, which is a LIP, or a 10-year basis, which is the IGA, an opportunity to deploy resources to what feels like the top priority of the system at that point in time. And I think we need to have a strong relationship with philanthropy as well, because they're also funding our the providers from a different angle. And I think there's a lot of alignment that can happen there. So just want to put that on the table. And lastly, on the PAC duty slide, I would really love for us to add a bullet point on the PAC duties, which is to develop a coordinated regional, state and federal agenda around the kind of investments that our system needs from the state and from the federal government. So I see that we have developed a regional action plan, a mission and vision, KPIs. That to me does not quite hit that. Like, if our region, 3 counties, 1 metro government, speaks with one voice to the federal government or to the state and says, we need X $100 million to do this for behavioral health, or we need you to step it up in this area, I'm scared of how much we could achieve in terms of resource gathering. And we're not doing that. I think quite the contrary, the infighting has impacted our ability to be effective in that. And so I'm really hopeful that this new body, kind of coming back to basics of governance and decency, is that we're not pointing fingers and throwing bombs at each other and having, I don't want to say ideological battles at work group meetings, but bruh, we need to get over that. If I was a non-elected person and I was seeing elected officials behave like that, why would I want to give you 10 or 20 more years of money? That's not healthy, right? And so I love that healthy, unhealthy tension. So those are my thoughts. Good luck. I won't be thinking of you as I help raise a baby, but this is really important. And I know that when I come back, I'll be really energized to see where the work has been and how we can help do that. And I know the suburban communities are feeling a lot about this process. And I know that I, as one of the suburban metro councilors, and my colleagues that are in the same realm, we need to help engage that aspect of leadership on the ground. So that's all.
Thank you. And thank you for that last one, especially because it wasn't my original proposal that the Policy Advisory Committee would have conversations about federal and state policy and coordinated action. And the 3 chairs asked me to take that out. The work group actually brought it back up and said that it was important to them. So I think that we can definitely get those things back in there. So just to wrap up, let's go to the last slide. This has been very helpful. Everyone, I really appreciate it. Next steps, I'm going to hand this out while we're talking, which is just the document that I referred to earlier. It's the regional framework, mission, vision, KPIs. What you're going to see in there is that there's still some ideas around what the mission statement should be. There are a lot of KPIs that we have not prioritized yet. It's a big list. So just keep all that in mind as we go through. But again, we're going to need some direction this fall to hand over to the Policy Advisory Committee, something that they will then adopt and we will work on with them. We will not be adopting anything with regard to this because the PAC really needs to get their hands around it next. So what do we have next in our next steps? We are looking to try and solidify the ordinance around the PAC, the TAC, the IRP, and transitioning the existing committees into this new format so that we can start up in the fall. Compliance and vision framework to follow as next key topics, as I just mentioned, for the council this September. Staff will do a lot of additional work this summer with partners to prepare for those conversations. And the framework would be handed to the PAC, as I said, as a key task with guidance from council and input from the TAC as we set it up. Because we're going to need that framework to even start the work at the PAC level. I also propose that we dive deeper on better contract management as a council this fall and at the PAC in the future. There are also some potential changes to regional fund use that we were just talking about. We need more time to consider what those might be, and the council will hold a work session discussion in the future on that. And there may need to be a way to consult with the PAC on that as well. I would love to have these concepts kind of complete by the end of 2025 so that they can be incorporated into the next fiscal year budget cycle. Meanwhile, staff will continue their work to implement the data sharing agreement and to implement the regional system evaluation that was discussed by the work group. And then finally, final slide. Is there anything else that you need to be prepared for July? Besides discussions with staff and me to get any other issues that you come up with while you review this? Is there anything else you need? No hands raised, no hands raised. All right, we're all ready for July. Yay. No, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of work to be done and I recognize that. Yes, Shane.
I wanted to clarify that if we do have an ordinance in July, the charter requires 90 days for it to take effect. So the committees won't legally be in place for 90 days unless you did an emergency.
Gotcha.
All right, so just be aware of that. Also, are you planning on a draft ordinance, Council President, that comes back that is further discussed, or do you want to kind of formalize?
We'll have a work session.
Prior to?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. There's no way we're going right to.
That's what I was hoping.
That would, yeah, that wouldn't even be optimal, but thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, thank you. I know I'm pushing, but I see that January 2028 deadline looming rather large and rather important. And so pushing forward is, you know, how big things get done. You take the time up front, which I think we have over the last year and a half done a lot of this work. Now it's getting down to the nitty gritty, but I appreciate the time and effort that's going to take from the council to get through this next couple of months. So with that, any COO communication, Deputy COO Holly.
Just really high level reminder that Marisa is out until July 7th. So Andrew and I are on point this week. Craig Stroud is on point next week. And just the last quick reminder for everyone here and listening is that the weather is getting hot. We are seeing more burn bans across the state. And so we've got several different safety policies that really talk about workplace safety. So just encouraging folks to make sure that they are paying attention to those, being as proactive as we can. That's all I've got.
Awesome. Counselors, any communication? Counselor Rosenthal.
Yeah, just a brief one. The RDPO had a field trip last Friday, which was to visit or to boat past the tank farm in North Portland. It's a very serious issue. There were 40 people, 45 people with representatives from the counties and many of the cities, including Vancouver. It's a very complex issue. There's a lot of work being done to mitigate it, but even the best mitigation might reduce the impacts by 20 or 30%. So if we have a subduction earthquake, we're going to have serious problems. It'll probably take 3, 5, 6 weeks to even partially recover. It's a historical legacy that people are working on, but it's very complicated and very expensive.
Okay, thank you. With that, we are adjourned and I will see you all back here Thursday, January 26th.